Hey, everybody, it's Devin and James here. We're here before we enter the Den of Sin to say a little bit about the Anchor app and Anchor FM, where we record our podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place.
Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer.
And if you're like James and myself living so far apart, we record ours and we're able to upload onto Anchor FM with no problems at all. And by hosting on Anchor, they distribute our podcast to all of the listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and so many more. It's a huge list.
It's everything you need to make a podcast in literally one place.
And you know what the best part of all is, James?
Is it because the Anchor is totally free?
It's because Anchor is totally free.
That's always the best part. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
All right, and on to the den. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Den of Sin, a movie podcast with Devin and James, where we talk about movies and Hollywood history and pop culture and hyperbole ensues. I'm Devin Lucas, and here with me always is James Dufresne. How you doing, James?
I'm doing good, man. How are you doing, Devin?
I'm doing okay. It's been an interesting couple of weeks, so we plan to record a lot more frequently, and then I went and got a job, so...
Isn't that always the way?
Yeah.
Dang you, Devin. How dare you get a job?
I know. I put it off as long as I could, I promise. But no, I have legitimately had some disability issues, but I found something that I really like that's, at least a pinky toe into the industry that I want to work in, and allows me to work from home and kind of at a pace to where my arms don't. Well, they still cramp up, but I'm allowed to like step away from the computer without somebody monitoring me on, some of these. Yes. I hear horror stories. So does my wife, who works from home too, about companies that monitor whether you're sitting at the computer for, X number of hours. So luckily they don't care as long as I'm productive. So.
That's it. And really that's all that should matter. I mean, we are actually going back to a, what is called a hybrid situation where I will be working partly from home, partly from office. And we have a very nice, huge, fancy, very modern office with, I work for a very well-known entertainment company and we have cool murals and stuff, but I'd still rather work from home. But they're very cool about understanding that, like, sometimes you're going to need to work from home a little bit more. And they also just, as long as you're getting your job done, I'm very fortunate because I have also heard, especially in my industry, other companies in my same industry are far more strict and far more big brother about everything, where they're tracking every second of your day. So thankfully, I don't have to worry about that currently. So it would be a nightmare if they did, because I spend half my job in my bed. Which, I can work from my bed, thankfully, but it's much easier. It has, I will say, during the last 2 years, it's been much more chill than it normally was. So,
well, I'm still getting used to the work from home thing. I'm set up in the bedroom. Like I said, my wife works from home too, and she's off in the other room. She's off in the living room, and she has a much bigger space because she's been working at home since before the pandemic. But yeah, I got this little desk in my bedroom, and I've got my 16-year-old cat, Olive, sitting behind me. And part of my job is I have to reach out to people on social media. And on the first day, I had my cat come over and walk across my keyboard, and I had to apologize to someone I had never met before and was trying to convince I was not a scam, because I'm not. So full disclosure, my cat walked across the keyboard.
Jesus.
I can't get her to move when I want her to, but when I'm working, she gets real curious.
That's what cats do.
But anyway, before we get started on the proper topic, we did promise in our last episode 500 years ago that we would follow up on how the Oscars went, and I made good on my promise to not watch the ceremony. So I have no idea how it went. Did anything happen that I might have missed? Or
I barely was paying attention. I did end up watching it, but yeah, I mean, I missed the first like 30 minutes too. But I mean, I heard this. There was one thing that happened, but let's not talk. It's been covered to death. It has nothing to do with actual cinema. I mean, I guess we could. I mean, it does parlay into. I mean, there was a winner involved, and it was, but everybody knows what we're talking about already. I don't feel like we need to even discuss it unless you'd like to.
well, I think it definitely has an impact on cinema as it pertains to the Academy Awards, but I also feel like you and I are not necessarily the voices that people are dying to hear on it. Let's hear what middle-aged white dudes think. Yeah, I mean, I'll say this much. I condemn the reaction, but if I had a time machine and, well, first off, if I had a time machine, this is not the thing I would go back and course correct.
Say.
But if I were to, I wouldn't stop the slap. I would stop the joke. It's just a dumb joke.
Yeah, it was a really stupid joke. Yeah, I mean, I have my own personal feelings on it, but at the end of the day, you know, and I actually read today that Smith is actually, Netflix dropped Bright 2, and then he had some documentary that was also dropped. So he's definitely seeing repercussions, good or bad. I mean, depending on where you fall on the issue, but you know, that's the reality of it. And in the entertainment industry in Hollywood, scandal will kill you. You know, I mean, look at what's going on with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. It's, you know, we want to, you know.
Yeah, but look what's happening with Louis C.K. You know, I mean, it's a mishmash. The world is strange, and everybody in it is strange. And
there's a lot of we could spend a whole podcast talking about this. But I will say, as that moment was like an oh wow moment, or like a oh my god moment. But the really heartbreaking moment was them wheeling out poor Liza Minnelli, who shouldn't have been on stage.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because I actually that is one of the scandals that I think we could shine a light on that some people don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it live, and I really didn't want to. I mean, it was just heartbreaking. Dementia runs in my family, and it's actually weirdly one of my triggers. Like, it's, you know, the last thing on earth I want to do is lose my mental faculties. But it was sad. Should she have been wheeled out there in the first place? I say no. I've heard that, you know, her family or friends have said that she was taken advantage of. I don't know, but I will say, Lady Gaga, God bless Lady Gaga, because she tried her best to handle it with grace and really like be there for Liza. It was very uncomfortable to watch, and I thought, as soon as I saw her come out, I'm like, this is a mistake. Like, she should not be presenting. Like, I saw the writing on the wall, but it was still sad. And, you know, when you're a Hollywood royalty like Liza Minnelli is, and her, you know, her and her family, it's like, you don't want to. That's not, you won't want to leave that as one of your last memories in Hollywood. So it was sad.
True. And I also have heard, this is kind of another reason why it's so upsetting, is that she was not quite as bad off as she looked on screen. She'd made an agreement with them that they specifically would not wheel her out in a wheelchair, that there was going to be a director's chair out there waiting for her, or either that or they were going to start with her already on the stage, which is something they did for Burt Reynolds a lot. If you notice, like some of his later talk show, you know, they don't introduce him. He's just on the couch when they come back from the break. But with Liza, she specifically did not want to be rolled out in a wheelchair, and with all the hullabaloo around the slap, everything was getting mixed up in the back, and they told her at the very last possible second, sorry, we're going to have to go with the wheelchair on this. So it really did make her look a lot worse than the condition she's currently in, and I don't think she would have agreed to do it had she known what this kind of reaction was going to be. But luckily it's all pro Liza. It's not like the world has always been pro Liza Minnelli. So I actually used to feel bad for her. You know, she just took a lot of shit for essentially being Judy Garland's daughter. Was the only thing that I could see why people wanted to hold her to a different standard or whatever. She was an icon, and she, you know, did things in her own right. Anyway, that's not what we were even here to talk about the Oscars with. I wanted to mention the ratings was what we were supposed to talk about.
Oh, okay.
And I think they kind of buried the lead on the ratings. I won't get too far into the boring numbers, but I think the slap really helped them kind of brush the numbers under the bed here, because in 2021 they had their lowest rated year in Oscar history, which makes sense. That was a year of nobody going to the movies. Nobody was really invested in what was nominated. Everyone knew it was going to be a truncated show. So they had an all-time low of 10.5 million viewers, which, for my estimation, it's still a hell of a lot of viewers for network television. But they did get up to 16.6 million this year. But the big headlines on it, first off, they weren't even big headlines. They were small headlines. But the small headlines were Oscars up 58% from last year. But it was from the lowest of the low that it's ever been to the second lowest it's ever been, also by a long shot. Because in 2020, it was 23.6 million watching. And in 2019, arguably the last year that like people were going to the movies, it was 29.6.
Wow.
And I looked it up. Their biggest year was when Titanic won in 98, where they had 55.3 million. So
which makes sense.
Yeah. And it was a bigger show back then anyways. So I'm not going to compare this year's numbers to the 1998 numbers, but just comparing it to the last 3 or 4 years, I don't think that they gained a single viewer by cutting off those categories that we were upset about.
Yeah.
And they still ran really long. Like the slap itself may have added a minute or two at most to the entire ceremony in terms of the reaction to it, and Chris Rock needing a minute to kind of get his bearings back. But yeah, it was still almost a 3-hour show, or slightly over 3 hours. I can't remember exactly which, but it just seemed like it made it all the more pointless that they removed these categories. And I think they shot themselves in the foot, frankly, to loop it back around to Will Smith, because this is, in my opinion, the only real way that it affects the Oscars in the long term, is that they've told him that he can't come back for 10 years, which means that next year, anybody who might have watched just out of curiosity to see if Will Smith came out and did the traditional presentation to the best actress.
I thought the same exact thing.
They just guaranteed that absolutely nothing's going to happen. And so yeah, my hopes are not high.
Can I just say the greatest moment for me in award show history is, I think it was the some MTV awards, but was when Paul Rubens, who had hadn't been on TV since the arrest, came out as Pee-wee and opened with the line, "Heard any good jokes lately?" It was brilliant. And I think just that one moment really like made the entire world forget about jerking off in a movie theater. So there is a weird public redemptive moment that you can have as a celebrity if you have goodwill still to you. And okay, I do for Will Smith. This is all I will say. Will Smith went from being the most beloved celebrity in the universe, from Men in Black and Independence Day, and coming off of The Fresh Prince, which really helped him become the biggest star, to being a joke. Like his weird family, his shitty movies, his marriage and stuff. I do feel bad. I feel like there's a lot that goes into, we as the public like to just kill people, roast them over the fire publicly when they stumble, or when they prove out to be normal people. And part of celebrity culture, I just and I'm not, that has nothing to say about what happened or whatever, but I'm not justifying it, or I'm also not demonizing it. I'm just saying it sucks, because I mean, even though he's a grown man and he's responsible, this was supposed to be his he won a Best Actor award, he was gonna have a moment, and it is what it is. All over, as you said, a really dumb joke. What a stupid joke. And
Rock shouldn't have made the joke, but honestly, Will Smith brought it on himself in terms of the reaction to his reaction, and I think he's going to be fine. Ultimately, he's not going to be the star that he once was, but he was already on the wane, anyways.
Yeah,
which
that's the thing. That's why his movies have been panned for years, and for him to get. And I didn't see the movie. I mean, I will be honest. When I heard that it was Will Smith in a biopic of the
Williams twins,
their dad, I was like, oh, all right, well, that sounds like movie of the week territory, but it could be all right. But having now, because of the Oscars, I was like, I'll probably never see it, just because It just all that's going to be in my head is that. So, but anyways, the Oscars.
Oh, and before we leave the topic entirely, I got to get your opinion. What did you think of the night that Zack Snyder had at the Oscars? For those who don't know, Zack Snyder, quote unquote, won, because it's not actually an award. There's no trophy. It doesn't, get etched in the museum or anything. But there was I can't even remember the names of the categories. One was most popular movie, and one was like most stand up and cheer moment or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, it was like most memorable something stupid, greatest. And God, that award specifically was so stupid. I didn't even remember that sequence in that movie, let alone it be, dude, what a fucking joke. And look, there is a populist approach to, like, just because everybody likes it and it's really popular doesn't make it bad. I know that we have a knee-jerk reaction culturally to think if something is populist and everybody liked it, then obviously it must be flawed in some way because it's watered down, because it has to appeal to the most amount of people. But, to be said, if there's a movie that everybody enjoyed, and also critics enjoyed it, I mean, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King is a great example. Like, that is a populist movie. They also happen to be really good and deserve an award, and, it was in that weird gray area. Fucking Zack Snyder's The Justice League was not that movie. It was a fan award makes some kind of sense if it's tempered with some kind of criteria, but you let that 4 however goddamn long that terrible movie is, dude. And I feel like that's also not the most popular. I feel like there were some shenanigans with that anyways, like all of those goddamn Restore the Snyderverse nerds were all like, pulling some kind of con somewhere, but
that's exactly what it was. I mean, when you put it out to vote and you put it out on like something like Twitter, and you're not able to control the bots and the fake accounts and whatever. This is how we touched on it briefly. This is how the movie that Johnny Depp made that nobody saw was actually like one of the like 5 front runners for the most popular film. Because most of the people voting for it hadn't seen it. They just thought that, Johnny Depp needed to be thrown a bone. And again, we've said it before, we love Johnny Depp. It has nothing to do with any of that. But you can't say that this is all going well ahead of the show when you know that the most popular category is now having like a front runner that literally nobody's seen.
Look, even though it's a crass way of looking at it, there's a very clear-cut way of saying what the most popular movie of the year was, and that's how much money the movie made.
Right?
How many people saw the shit? If the most people saw it, it's probably that. If that case, then Spider-Man No Way Home should have won, because that was the biggest movie.
I think that was kind of what most people were expecting to have happen. And to be clear, again, it was Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. Was that what it was called? That's what won most popular film.
That's right. Yeah.
And then Zack Snyder's Justice League cut was
one moment.
And I don't even think that should have been eligible. That was from a different year.
Well, so that's what I was going to say.
The best
exactly.
movie of the year was Garfield. Yeah, let's start that. Next year, let's fuck everything up, and we'll get a campaign going. All of the Cinemaniacs tweet in and say their favorite movie of the year was Garfield 2: A Tale of Two Kitties.
That's right.
And and see if we can't get the award. But
and the thing is, man, like I didn't like the movie. I certainly didn't like them. Yeah, how did that win? Like, that doesn't make sense.
They didn't make any kind of a clear rule. I mean, by this standard, then any of the various director's cuts of Blade Runner should have been nominated any of the years those came out, because they're always good.
But, and that sequence too, in a kind of mediocre movie. And dude, if you're watching this and you're trying to come up with some sort of Marvel bias or something, I've been reading DC Comics for longer than maybe some of our listeners have been alive. Like, I was a DC comic fan since I was 10 years old. I love DC Comics. I have liked a lot of their movies in the past. This has nothing to do with that. But the Snyderverse ain't it. There are pieces of it that I can stand behind and say. I will tell you, while we're just talking about current, I will say that Ezra Miller is not one of those things I stand behind. That guy seems like a real piece of shit. And dude, you look who you got in your movie, Snyderverse. You've got Amber Heard and fucking Ezra Miller. Way to go! If that doesn't kind of sum up your overall product, I don't know what else does. Yes. Anyways.
I don't blame him for that. It's look, I have nothing against Zack Snyder, and this is
I don't necessarily. Well,
as we get into tonight's topic, there will be a couple of times where I'm mentioning I have nothing against this person personally, and fully acknowledge them as artists and very popular artists. But in the case of Zack Snyder, especially, I'm not there for his movies. If I could hang out with him and have a conversation, I'm sure it would be interesting. I'm sure I'd have a good time and I'd walk away smarter. But I can't watch his. They bore me to tears, and just the visuals just. They don't give me an actual headache. They just kind of give my soul a headache.
See, I will say, I think his movies have looked great. Weirdly, like, I'm one of the few people that doesn't apparently hate his Watchmen movie. And I think, there's a few things I have a big problem with aesthetically, specifically. But I think a lot of it, he definitely has a strong eye, and he has a very personal style, like it or leave it. Maybe honestly, like, we could talk about this, we don't need to be another podcast talking about that Zack Snyder, but at some point, we could definitely revisit it, because I have a lot of feelings on the subject and him as a filmmaker. But we're not here to talk about Zack Snyder or the Snyderverse or Justice League or his stupid zombie. Well, his first zombie movie was actually, I really enjoyed his first zombie movie. That other one is, woo boy, stupid to the core. But anyways, apparently the most popular movie, so.
Apparently. But why don't you tell us what we are here to talk about today, James?
Well, Devin, we are here to talk about the works of great. Do I refer to him as a character actor or just as an actor?
Dude, I have been struggling. Well, let's tell everybody who it is, and then that will make that the first part of the conversation.
With Michael Biehn, the works of Michael Biehn. I've always considered him, like Lance Henriksen, somebody who is a character actor. Even though I don't think they're traditionally could be considered character actors, but they do always kind of play similar characters.
They're in a lot of the same movies.
Yeah. Exactly. Together, yeah. But I will say that revisiting some of his earlier films, I always had an appreciation. Like, there'll be a few things we talk about tonight, which specifically have always left a lasting impression on me. But seeing some of his earlier works, like, really his range and the promise that he showed, and that. This is no commentary on him, but I don't think he lived up to the potential of where I think after Terminator and Aliens, at the time, especially, like I said, as a young person when those films came out, where you sort of thought he was going to go as far as his career. But needless to say, he's a very interesting actor. I am definitely a fan of his work, and a really big fan of some of the movies we'll talk about tonight. But yeah.
I have always been a fan of Michael Biehn as well, and for the record, it is Michael Biehn. He will correct you if you say it wrong. I've heard it happen in interviews, or actually, I haven't heard him correct. I've heard him praise somebody for getting it right.
What would be the other pronunciations?
Yeah, it's spelled Biehn, and so I think even myself when I was a kid, I used to think it was Michael Biehn, but it's just a short Bean. But I think he gets Michael Biehn, and there's lots of things. You throw an H in a word, it will throw off English speakers.
As somebody with a really weird last name, I fully get it.
So anyways, what I find interesting, this is going to be an interesting conversation, I think, for us to have, because so far when we do our like personality profiles or the deep dives, first off, we tend to choose directors to talk about. And the times when we have talked about actors, we've talked about like full-blown movie stars, like forward-facing central role movie stars.
Yeah.
And so this is the first time that we are talking about somebody who really kind of more is categorized as a character actor. And it's not a step down in my book. I want to be clear that's
no, not at all.
I can probably name more character actors that I like truly love than I can movie stars. So
I literally was the point I was about to make myself. Like, I think character actors get the luxury of getting to play more unique parts or get to, it's hard to carry a movie anyways. As a star, like carrying out the weight of a full movie on your back, like, you got to be in every scene or in the majority of the scenes, and you have to be likable. Like, character actors don't have to be likable. And I think that's one of the greatest things. Like, some of my favorite actors are rarely likable in cinema. Lance Henriksen is a great example of that. But I do think Michael Biehn had the looks and the talent to be a movie star, and it just didn't work out that way.
It just kind of escaped him. And I think he's a little mystified by it too, because he knows what he's been in, and he knows what a big deal those movies are. And I know that he did have some drug and alcohol problems later on, but most of that I hear about, of course, I don't know the personal history and how far back it goes. And it, oftentimes in these cases, it's a problem that's growing all through, teenage years and into adulthood, and kind of reaches its peak at a certain point. But I would be willing to bet that part of why he ended up with such a problem was because he was trying to figure out, why the hell am I not a star? Like, why is everyone around me becoming a star and I'm just that guy? And I think, and again, this is nothing against him. I think it's actually completely against the audience that was missing out on him while he was in his prime, so to speak. I think he's certainly a tough guy, and you see him in anything post Tombstone, and Tombstone and on, you have no problem believing that this is a mean son of a bitch who could kick your ass. But there was a sensitivity to him in the earlier films, especially like in Kyle Reese in the Terminator, where I've actually heard he actually had quite an incredible gay fan base in the early years, because he's not gay himself, but I think he kind of represented kind of the more sensitive, soft-featured version of the action star ideal of the 80s.
I can say that there was a movie that has an interesting scene that we can talk about later that, I would imagine probably didn't help with it having a gay fan base, but still.
I was going to mention it when it came up. Yeah.
I also have a theory as to why he might not have gone down that path of being a quote-unquote A-lister or a full-on movie star. But suffice it to say, honestly, like, I think the fact that we're doing this podcast, and I know lots of my friends would be super stoked to talk about Michael Biehn and his works, and I think he's had that sort of legacy. I think being a standout character in lots of very memorable movies that a lot of people hold to, close to their heart, and, a lot of quote unquote fan favorite films. He's one of those guys that sort of like nerds just love, and not just movie nerds, but just, nerds in general. He's one of those actors that I think people just have an appreciation for. He may not, your grandmother and your aunt may not know who he is. That's a weirdly misogynistic. Why did I just single out grandmothers and aunts? Well, because I also think maybe it was subconsciously because he has been in a lot of masculine movies, specifically his mid-career, which we'll talk about. But anyways, I didn't mean that to sound misogynistic. So
no, and I will back it up, because I don't think it's taken the way that you think it was taken, because I can tell you from experience, when I told my family who we were covering this week for the podcast, my dad and my brother and sister were all like, "Oh, cool, that's going to be awesome." And then my mom, about 10 minutes later, texts me, "I hear he's in the Terminator."
Very good, Mom. She's not wrong.
Right? So yeah, I think he does. He's got a really strong fan base amongst the first wave of hardcore movie nerds. Those of us who were, I guess we would call elder millennials, born in the late 70s, maybe early 80s, late 70s for the two of us. But I think he was just a figure of our childhood where we looked at him as a movie star. We didn't think he wasn't a movie star. He was.
I thought, exactly. Movies. And he had the great luxury of just being cool, like almost like our age, not to the same level of maybe celebrity, but he was sort of one of our Steve McQueens. Like he was always cool. Like he was always kind of like a badass, kind of had a mystique around him. But like you said, with a sort of a little bit more of a vulnerability or more of a nice guy edge to him a little bit.
A softness, which I don't mean as the opposite of hardcore, but there's like a softness to his features and to his voice and the way that he uses it. And
it's a very soft voice. Yeah.
But anyways, let's get into some of the movies. I'm assuming that this is going to be more of a greatest hits type episode, but I always like to throw in some oddballs too.
I mean, like
the guy's had like 110 different parts. So
and that's
incredible.
So a few things, caveats to this. So he's been a lot of TV. I mean, he was in only one episode of The Mandalorian, but it's one of the best episodes of Mandalorian, and he was fucking so cool in it. And then I really was hoping he was going to be a returning character. Sadly, that was not the case. He's been in The Walking Dead. He's been, throughout TV shows in the 70s, even in 80s, or super early 80s. But we're mainly going to talk about his film work, if that's okay. And again, he's been in so many movies. We're only going to sort of kind of pick and choose what you and I think is probably his most memorable roles or important roles or whatever. So, and if there's a movie that you feel like we overlooked or that we didn't give enough credit to, definitely leave it in our social media comments. Let us know. If we left off your favorite, our bad, but give us some feedback. We're happy to take that feedback and ignore it and move on to a different episode.
Bring it on, fans of Scorpion King 4 Quest for Power. Prove me wrong. Well, let's start. I don't know that we necessarily have to go linear, but I think let's at least start somewhat linear with a movie that I had never seen before we started to do this. And I'm really glad I saw it because it's exactly the type of thing that as a classic film fan in 2022, it's my happy place. The movie is called The Fan, and it was not the first movie he did, but it was the first thing that he did where he was really noticeable. He actually was an uncredited baseball player in the background of Grease, which I would love to go through and spot him in that. But he's had some parts prior to this, but this is the one that I think kind of put him on the map, and
for good reason. I mean, he's fucking great. I mean, he's not. Well, I'll let you talk about it, and then I'll chime in when I feel like.
Okay. Well, The Fan came out in 1981, and the reason why I love this kind of a movie, it's not because it's a masterpiece. It's not because it's some epic, or it's not even a lost classic per se. Like we're not talking about Face in the Crowd or something that is just criminally ignored. It was kind of a middle of the road picture that is exactly the kind of thing that doesn't come out nowadays, or if it does, it comes out in streaming and nobody knows it's out there, and you have to really know to be searching for it. But this was kind of a major thing in the early 80s. These movies starring kind of middle-aged stars that maybe cost 10 million at most, and usually are thrillers or dramas. And in this case, The Fan co-stars, or actually it stars Lauren Bacall, who we've talked about on the show before. She's no longer 19 years old in this one. No. And her ex-husband and BFF is played by James Garner, who we've also talked on the show about how much I love James Garner. And even in a bad movie, I just have fun watching him. Which I had a thought real quick, complete non sequitur. I just want to throw this out there to the ether in case anyone hears it and thinks, Bruce Campbell in an update of the Rockford Files would be amazing. Anyways.
Wow. I agree with that. I'm totally on board for that.
But anyways, back to The Fan. Lauren Bacall plays an actress who is kind of on the waning side of things. Not quite the big star that she was, but she's been a star for a very long time, and she's a little insecure, and she's doing her first big Broadway musical. And at the same time, she's having her first stalker fan, and that is played by Michael Biehn, a very young, fresh-faced Michael Biehn. I mean, he looks like he doesn't even look like he's graduated college yet. Like he's maybe 20, 21, very, very young, and terrifying. There's something in his eyes that is like chilling. He became one of my favorite screen psychopaths in this. He starts off by kind of being in love with her and sending love letters, but as he's realizing that these letters are going to Lauren Bacall's assistant rather than to her, and he's getting responses from the assistant, he starts to get very antagonistic towards the assistant and starts to try to correct her through the letters and tell her how she's supposed to do her job and how she can't stand between them. And they get increasingly aggressive. But of course, the assistant, she's mentioning it to Lauren Bacall, but this is 1981. The whole idea of a stalker fan, this movie is famous for literally coming out like a couple of weeks after John Lennon was shot. So I don't even think this movie would have been made had it been right after that. And it was actually criticized for being this gruesome thing about that kind of stalking because of John Lennon. But John Lennon is what put this kind of behavior on the map. This was something that I'm sure went on behind the scenes in the 50s. I'm sure there were all sorts of deranged people reading the old celeb rags and whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, she, of course, they don't take it seriously, and in fact, they don't even consider him the first suspect when the assistant gets sliced up. And the assistant is played by Maureen Stapleton, which is the same year I think that she won an Oscar for Reds, and she's at the top of her form in here too, and she's really kind of touching and sweet in this. But yeah, Michael Biehn finds her and fucks her up, and then this is how the actual investigation gets started. Hector Elizondo gets involved, and whenever Hector Elizondo gets involved in something, he's going to see it through to the end. He's the police officer who's investigating the case and trying to protect Lauren Bacall, and she's getting more and more needy and desperate and vulnerable, and needing her ex-husband James Garner around more. But the hook is that he's getting married to someone else, so she feels very selfish for trying to make him stay with her, even though she's just desperately afraid. And desperately lonely. They make that a part of her character from the get-go. And I thought that this movie really packed the punch. It had all the drama that I needed. It had all the thriller that I needed. It felt oddly like what if Bob Fosse wrote a version of King of Comedy and had Brian De Palma direct it.
I can see that. I can definitely see that.
And this predates King of Comedy, by the way, in terms of obsessed fans.
So I had never seen it either. I just watched it very recently. It's one of those movies where, once that it was panned pretty hard by critics, and that, the production, it was supposed to star Elizabeth Taylor. It was not supposed to be a quote unquote slasher or a horror movie, which I actually don't think it still doesn't. I think it fits in a different genre, which I will get into, but
this was when critics were lumping anything with the straight razor in as a slasher movie, and just railing on it. And I think exactly. the Lennon factor had something to do with that as well.
Yeah.
But critics seem primed to hate this.
Yeah. With that said, I think there are maybe some conflicts in tone sometimes, where it is trying to be like more of a classic sort of drama character study kind of movie. But first off, I think the movie looks phenomenal. There's some shots in it that are fucking really memorable, really stick out.
Clearly inspired by Dress to Kill, I think.
Yes. I will actually say, I think I've said this about another film on this podcast, but to me it actually felt way more like if the movie had been filmed in Italy with Italian actors, it would be a giallo.
Yeah.
Because it's not even just that scene where he's hitting her in the face with the straight razor. That is literally straight out of like a Diodato movie. Like the imagery is so giallo to me. But
you fucking nailed it. I hadn't even thought of that. You fucking nailed it.
Just even the tones of obsession about, this distinction between a celebrity and a fan. Like there's tonally all these things that would make it really fit into the giallo subgenre. But Michael Biehn is so good in this movie, especially if you know him as Corporal Hicks or as Kyle Reese. He is so creepily intense. And like even when he doesn't say, like, by today's standards, he doesn't say anything super vulgar, but for the time he has this vulgarity to him and what he says.
Some of it is super vulgar. I think you're forgetting what he said he was going to do with his meat cleaver.
Oh, that's right. Exactly. How would you like to get effed?
Yeah.
That's true. Good point. But but God, he's so good in it. I mean, the cast is great. I will say that I think James Garner just felt underused in it, maybe, but Bacall was great because she's Lauren Bacall and she's playing an age-appropriate character and a kind of character we don't see a lot of, especially at that point, which is older women stars. And I think she was great in it. I thought, you can definitely feel like it was a thriller that was shoehorned into maybe having excessive. Real quick, can we talk about a scene that I can't believe I've never even heard about before? But when the guy that she takes on the date and he goes to the pool, that is one of the it's not like excessively gory. It's just first off, the way it was filmed and even the music and the tension and the thought of what he does with that razor under the water. Dude, how have I not heard about this movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really freaky. It was really effective. I don't even think there was any blood in that scene.
The pool fills up with blood a little bit, but it's
okay.
not. I mean, they don't show it. There's no like they don't show it or anything. It's all in the way that the actor like screams and stuff. But phenomenal. You know, there's again the sequence where, which I feel like sort of is the one scene I have a problem. Well, I also have a problem with Lauren Bacall singing.
I was gonna say this. Like, I love Lauren Bacall. She's great in this. I love seeing her vulnerable because she doesn't do vulnerable in a lot of the stuff that I watch.
Yes.
But I'd also never seen her sing, at least at this age, and she shouldn't.
She should never. And she sings too much.
Yes, because she's playing the lead in a musical. Yeah. And,
terrible. It's so memorably terrible that Hearts and Diamonds, whatever the song is called. Oh God, that was
As brutal. She was singing, I half expected Michael Biehn to be watching in the back row in his tuxedo and go, "This is it? Fuck this!" and like walk out the back and do nothing.
Yes, I 100%. But there's a scene where it has nothing really to do with the plot, but where he goes to a gay bar and this guy hits on him, and I guess it is plot. He turns it into plot. It's part of his strategy. That's right. Where he basically he takes this guy up to the roof. The guy is going down on him, and then he fucking stabs the guy to death and then lights him on fire. It's just very brutal.
But the idea, though, was, not that this makes it less brutal. I'm not like, no, you don't understand. It was, it's just a misunderstanding. No, he deliberately found somebody that looked like him.
Exactly.
So that he could fake his own death, and then the police would think that the danger was over. But he didn't exactly need to let the guy go down on him prior, which doesn't bother me murder bothers me, but
exactly. But being lit on fire is a bummer. But
the blowjob was not the offensive part of the scene, but it said something about that character that it wasn't just, he could have killed him as soon as he got him up on the roof and set him on fire. Exactly. He had the body that looked like him. So
it's just one of those things where you're watching it happen because, again, you don't really know what's going on. Like, watching it happen, I'm like, wait, why is this happening? And then that's right. He's setting it up so he looks like he's dead. There's some plot hole stuff, but we don't need to get into it. Overall, though, like you said, it's not a forgotten classic, but it is a fucking really underappreciated thriller. Very well shot. There's that sequence when he's sort of narrating and he's just in this like sea of park benches. And it's just I was like, again, like this shot is so beautiful and also like weird. And like, how have I not seen this before? So, and again, Lauren Bacall's great in it. She's Lauren Bacall. But for this to be a young Michael Biehn, especially knowing the roles he would do later, although he's definitely plays a great villain, we'll also touch upon that. But he's so good in this role. And in a way, like I was like, he's too good looking to be in this role. You expect some creep to be, like some, pot-bellied, weird-looking old middle-aged guy.
Or any of the weird sort of pockmarked actors of that era who... Yeah, but he's great in it. I was really impressed. Again, having just recently seen it, I was like, dude, this is going to be a movie I'm going to... And I think Shout Factory... I looked for it afterwards. I think Shout Factory has I don't know if it's still available, but I think Shout Factory put it out. They did at one point. I don't know if it's still available, but I need to have it.
Yeah, I'm going to say I need to buy it because it's one of those I will.
This is one of those movies that will disappear someday. And like, I guarantee this will not be on a bunch of streaming services 10 years from now. Buy it and own it so that we can preserve it. Yeah, I just found out that the movie I Shot Andy Warhol is a lost film now. And Julie Taymor's Titus is a lost film now, which was an Academy Award nominee with Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are people who own the DVDs of this. The price of those are only going to skyrocket. But yeah, no prints exist. Nothing. None of the original elements exist for movies that came out, when we were already teenagers or in adulthood. So don't lose movies like The Fan. That's why movies like The Fan are such a treat when I find them, because I feel like I said, not an undiscovered classic, but just wow, how can we let this one just go away?
If you're a fan of thrillers and proto slashers, or not proto because it didn't come before. Well, it was early, but if you're into like sort of darker character study films or like whatever, I feel like there's a huge fan base for what this movie is that probably have never heard it, seen it, let alone heard of it. And I think if you're listening to this podcast and you like you said, if you like King of Comedy or those kind of like films, definitely give this a chance. Like, it's great. I think I don't know if it's as good as King of Comedy, but it's a great movie and definitely worth a watch.
I can tell you it's definitely not as good as King of Comedy.
Yeah.
But I can say that it stands up in my mind. I don't know if this director's fans will kill me for saying this. I do think that it stands up to Dress to Kill, because I think Dress to Kill is very uneven as well. And I think as much as I love Michael Caine, I think he's rather silly in it.
Yeah.
So
we have the exact opinion on Dress to Kill.
Yeah. And I think because I've seen Dress to Kill so many times, anytime I need to scratch that itch at this point, I'd rather watch The Fan instead, because I haven't seen it a million times yet.
Right. Yeah.
So in a way, I think The Fan's going to potentially replace Dress to Kill as my, occasional American giallo type feature. From there, Biehn was in a movie called The Lords of Discipline, which I did not watch, but then he moved on to a movie that I think everyone in the world has seen, even people that don't like this kind of movie, or at least everybody in the world has heard of it. And that is James Cameron's second directorial outing, The Terminator.
Yep.
Have you seen The Terminator, James?
Look, I've gone on record in many public forums to say I am a much bigger fan of Terminator than I am Terminator 2, and that the original Terminator is a horror film that just has sci-fi elements, where Terminator 2 is a fucking action film that has sci-fi elements. The stalk and kill aspect of Terminator is truly terrifying. It's basically this unkillable. Anyways, I'm not here to talk about all of that, but of course, it was one of my favorite movies growing up. It was one of my most rewatched movies. I loved Kyle Reese. For years and years after, I always said I look nothing like Michael Biehn, but I was always like, he's got such a cool look, a very like simple, direct look that would be easy to pull off. But if I was going to cosplay, I'd like to cosplay as Kyle Reese. It's such a great movie. I mean, to me, it is quintessential. What I feel is kind of missing from cinema these days, which is, it is, it wasn't, nobody thought that movie was going to do anything at the time. And, I even remember at the time, some people kind of making, I remember it being like sort of the butt of a joke sometimes in media, but what a fucking tense, original, just what a fucking great movie. Like,
it's pretty much perfect. I can't, I mean, yes, there are budgetary constraints. Yes, there are moments where you can see the seams. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. There's when, he looks so goofy when he prosthetic Terminator, the animatronic Terminator, when he's missing his eye. It looks so bad. As a kid, I was like, oh, that looks terrible. But again, those flaws almost sort of enhance it. Make it feel more like a little grittier.
There's a magic to it. There's no magic to CGI. And I think I think Terminator 2, ironically, was the last time that CGI was looked at like it was magic. Because I remember being 12 and seeing that in the theater and being like, whoa, now they got to make Silver Surfer,
Yeah, same.
And I'm definitely more of a fan of T2 than you are.
It's not to say I don't like T2 or that I didn't like it at the time, but it is so corny and I am so not offended by like Arnold being a good guy in it, and like I'm actually kind of a sucker for that. Like when the bad guy turns into a good guy, it's a weird thing for me. I like when villains become good guys. Weird sidebar, but the way it's handled is so corny, and I fucking cannot stand Edward Furlong. I don't like his character. I don't like him.
I had a hard time believing that he was going to be the savior of the earth.
Exactly.
I had no problem believing Sarah Connor was going to birth the savior of the earth. Though.
Yes.
Like she had to go through a metamorphosis in the first film, which of course we see by the time that, she's the ultimate kick-ass in part 2. Yeah. In the first, you have to see her go from frustrated waitress to the hunted, and then to the victor of the most disturbing stalking I could imagine.
Real quick, because I need to address. As a kid, it never bothered me or seemed weird to me when there was a strong... I'm not just saying this. 2 of my favorite film heroes of all time is Ellen Ripley and Sarah Connor. Sarah Connor in T2, she steals the movie. She is the coolest thing in the movie. Agreed. So it's like strong women, badass heroes I've never had a problem with it. If done right with the right actress in the right role, fucking yeah, dude. But with that said, like, yeah, Terminator 2 isn't that great, but it's also missing Michael Biehn.
Well, it almost wasn't.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about, there was a deleted scene where she has a dream that she's talking to Kyle Reese.
Yeah.
For anybody that really has like had their head up their ass since 1984, of course, Kyle Reese is the man who is sent back through time to stop the Terminator from killing the mother of the savior of the future. And he meets his demise by the end of the first one. So she has a dream sequence where he's back, and it was just kind of a fan service thing, I think. And when it started to get into being a very long movie, I think it was easy for Cameron to cut that, and I think he made the right decision. Yeah. But even before that, though, Cameron initially was interested in having Michael Biehn play the T-1000 because in the future they would have figured out what was going on, and much like Arnold would have to fight to get Sarah to believe that he's a good guy now, she would run straight to the arms of Kyle Reese.
Yeah.
So we could have ended up with Kyle Reese as the T-1000, which I love Robert Patrick. He's done some really cool stuff. Copland in particular, I really love.
Yeah.
I would be happy to lose him in Terminator 2 to have Kyle Reese. I don't know if it would have made it a better movie, but I think it would have been a more dramatic turn to have somebody coming after her that she trusted.
But also that it's that dichotomy, it's that flip. It's that, the juxtaposition of you were the bad guy in the original movie, you were the good guy. Now your roles are reversed in this movie. I never heard that before. I'm now more angry at the movie that I didn't get that.
Well, to be fair, this was internet research that covered that little tidbit. So I don't know if this was ever really something on James Cameron's mind, or actually I'm willing to bet that it was, but it might have only been on his mind for 2 days.
Where he just didn't want to, But I will say, I think seeing like a sort of dead-eyed, I think Michael Biehn could have killed that, especially knowing some of his later roles and or even his earlier roles, like the fan.
Like the fan, yeah.
But man, that's a bummer. But I will say this is my theory. I've thought about this before, but it really came to context when we were talking about why he maybe never became the leading man kind of movie star that he definitely had the capabilities to be. I think it was getting over, even though that movie was a vehicle for Schwarzenegger. Even though Schwarzenegger wasn't supposed to be the original Terminator, we all know that. There was other names bandied about, including O.J. Simpson, which would have been weird as fuck. But that movie made Arnold the biggest star, where, when you play second fiddle, not that Kyle Reese is the star, but we spend the most amount of screen time with him, even more than Sarah Connor.
Absolutely. And he's actually only on screen with Arnold as the Terminator in one shot. So
is it only one shot?
It's only one shot that they share together. There's the scene in Tech Noir. Is it Tech Noir or Cafe Noir? Okay, Tech Noir.
Tech Noir.
When they go to
that's my favorite
Noir
version of the Terminator, is the Tech Noir Terminator.
Yes.
Like this weird, new wave punk Terminator, and I love it.
I agree, after he stole Bill Paxton's clothes.
Yeah.
Bill Paxton comes up a lot in this too. There's the scene in Tech Noir where he comes in and he's first introduced to Sarah Connor, who has no idea why these two people are shooting above her at each other. All she knows is that other Sarah Connors in her area are being picked off by a mass murderer, or a serial killer, I should say. Mass murderers all at once. But anyways, he's in that scene with them, but they only share one shot. And then of course he's versus the Terminator for the third act, but it's not Arnold, it's the robot skeleton.
It's the endoskeleton.
So technically he does have more screen time with the Terminator, but he only has one shot with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And people ask him all the time what it was like to work with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he's like, I really don't know. I did one scene with him and we got one shot, but it was a great scene. Like you said, it was kind of the most iconic look of the Terminator. And I hear people too, this is kind of going off in a different direction. This is a non sequitur of sorts, but I listened to a couple of podcasts recently about the Terminator just to kind of brush up on this and see what other people were saying. And I heard a couple of people talk about there's kind of an obligatory sex scene in the middle of it. And I actually think, I've said that about all sorts of movies. I talked about that in Blue Steel when we talked on here, and how there's no way Jamie Lee Curtis is.
That's about as obligatory as you get. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But by Catherine Bigelow, so I felt like that was forced on her, hey, we've got to have a sex scene. And that happened a lot, whether you were working in mainstream cinema or whether certainly if you were working in low budget fare, like people were saying sex sells and there wasn't an internet yet and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But the sex scene in the Terminator is done rather tastefully.
Yes.
And it's the only moment where you're going to know that this guy is the father of John Connor. If you don't have the sex scene, then you just imply, oh, and then they fucked and then he died in the end. They had to like really show us and not tell us for us to believe that these two people had a passion for each other, even though they were falling for each other under the weirdest of circumstances. And this is where I think it really comes into play that Michael Biehn had that softness and that sensitivity and that in some ways awkwardness in the Terminator, because there's no way that she would fall for Arnold Schwarzenegger in action movie mode. There's no way if this was done nowadays that she would fall for The Rock or somebody like that in action movie mode. That's just gratuitous sex in my mind. There had to be a connection. I don't think that those actors would have been able to make it seem like anything but gratuitous, whereas his Kyle Reese was able to make it as sensual as you could get in the middle of that sort of action.
Yeah, I actually think I think that love scene, and I'll call it a love scene and not a sex scene. Like, I think that love scene is actually done very tastefully, and it never struck me in the decades of watching it that it felt lascivious or like meant to titillate. It's a story-driven moment.
It's the only sex scene in the entire series, I believe.
Yep. I will say this: one of the things that I have to say, James Cameron. The more James Cameron directed, the less I've liked James Cameron's material. And I'm not saying that because he did Titanic and stuff. I just think that,
I love Titanic. I saw it 3 times, but I
like Titanic.
It's aged badly. I never need to see it again, but in 1997.
It looks great and there's some great moments, but it's actually a really shitty script and the characters are really one note. But anyways, I feel like James Cameron was still the best to me when he was coming out of Corman. When he was basically a practical effects guy and a designer and an artist who just happened to make some cool movies. But I feel like once he realized he was James Cameron, and it doesn't matter. But the thing is,
knew he was James Cameron. It was once the world realized.
That's right. That's true, and I've heard that as well too.
Yeah. On the set of the Terminator, Michael Biehn claims that they actually made T-shirts for the crew that said, "You can't scare me. I work for James Cameron."
I know. Even when he did, oh my God, what is this pre-Aliens sci-fi, the one for Corman?
Piranha 2, The Spawning?
No, the other one. God dang it. He, not Dead Space. What?
That
Cameron did.
I don't know. I know that he did. I know that he did some matte painting work for Escape from New York.
Hold on. No, he was
Corman, obviously.
Yeah. So from my understanding, he was a production designer in Galaxy of Terror, but he became the de facto, basically the director, that the studio was like trusted him more than the director.
That's on my list of stuff to see. I've actually always wanted to see that, and I caught a piece of it late night on cable. But
I mean, it's a Corman alien, it's a sci-fi horror movie done by Corman. So as long as you know that going in, you'll get exactly what you're expecting. So, but he was famously for the backgrounds he used, they needed a way to make a cool sci-fi looking wall for cheap. So he just bought 300 McDonald's Big Macs and used the styrofoam containers and you glued them all together. And he made this what I'm trying to say, this does lead back into Terminator where, his sense of design and his world building and everything was so on point that even though it's a ridiculous movie, this fucking killer cyborg from the future who wears a flesh suit, it felt so real because of how meticulous everything in that world is designed. Kyle Reese's costuming where it's he's one step above hobo, and it just, everything works in it. And it, from the
he's
visual,
literally wearing a hobo's pants.
Literally, yeah. Literally. Literally, exactly. But with some stolen sneakers from a survival store or whatever.
He got the most futuristic looking sneakers in 1984. I don't, but I will say there's a brilliance to the writing because we'd already all seen time travel movies prior to the Terminator, and oftentimes I don't think the Terminator is even necessarily first to mind when people think about time travel movies, because it's not about that per se, but it was having somebody from the future come to now, to the present, which was pretty exciting. And I don't, off the top of my head, I can't think of that happening before. I'm sure it had, but certainly nothing big enough to have made an impact like the Terminator did. And then to have them have to come back with nothing but organic material, meaning they come back naked and unarmed, meaning that they can't dress like they're from the future and they can't come with weapons from the future. They have to look like us.
Yep.
The setup for that, the world building on that is just astounding.
Yep.
And I'm going to use that to spill into the next thing before we turn this into the Terminator episode, because we're going to keep on the Cameron tip, because the next thing he made was Aliens, where he played Hicks. Michael Biehn played Hicks. This time, Cameron had another visionary director, Ridley Scott, another director who some of his films just absolutely excite me, and other of his movies I'm just, it's not even that I see it. I'm not interested. Like,
yeah.
And Cameron is getting to be that way too. Like, I seriously doubt I will see any of the Avatar movies beyond this first one.
No, I absolutely will not.
Yeah.
That first one is, I don't care what anybody says. It's atrocious. It's assault on the senses. I hate everything. They had some cool mech suits in it. That's the only comment. There's some cool kind of battle tech looking. That's a fucking nerd reference that nobody will get. But
nothing that he didn't do just as interestingly in Aliens, though.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was the first thought when Stephen Lang came out in his little robot suit in Avatar. I'm like, oh, keep your hands off her, you bitch, was what I thought. Or you get away from her, you bitch. That's the line. I love the classic Ellen Ripley line. But Aliens comes out in 1986, and there's a director's cut in 1990, one of the first major films to have a director's cut released to video before even Blade Runner did. And speaking of the Academy Awards and populist films, Aliens was nominated for Best Picture, and Sigourney Weaver was nominated for Best Actress, and they campaigned to get Michael Biehn nominated for Best Supporting. So this was an example of the Academy does sometimes pick the popular movies when it's as amazing as Aliens. And he jumped onto Ridley Scott's concept and said, now let's see what I can do with it. Not in a way that, I don't think he was trying to better it. I think he was just trying to James Cameron it up and make it more his style, which is perfectly acceptable when you're directing the sequel to somebody else's film, in my opinion. And boy, did he. It feels like a Cameron movie, and it feels, aside from the fact that someone might be a little lost coming into the beginning of it, most of the movie feels like its own standalone film, partly because Ellen Ripley's the only one that continues, and they give her, all of her due in the first act, especially in the director's cut where you find out about her daughter and all this other kind of stuff. And then she has the fight against the Queen Alien, which is iconic and classic. But the bulk of the movie is the story of her off on this alien planet with the Marines, and he turned it into a Marine movie. I think the tagline for the movie was even "This time it's war." And these Marines, who were clearly the baddest of the bad-ass Marines, Space Navy SEALs or whatever they might be, they get scared quick when they realize how outnumbered they are by how strong these things are, how little deadly ammo they have.
Yep.
Like, to take care of one onslaught of aliens on their ship, they pretty much take care of all of the rounds of ammo that they have for their guns. Yep. The tension is just incredible. And you got Bill Paxton freaking out the whole time, which is, this is actually the third movie that Michael Bihn's made with Bill Paxton at this point. I think there's 5 in total. Yep. But it's the first time that Biehn and Paxton are really sharing screen time. And those two in any movie, God, I miss Bill Paxton. I wish I could have worked with Bill Paxton. Here. And he apparently, he actually ad-libbed most of his dialogue in that movie. Like, Cameron's famous for writing action and not much dialogue, and kind of giving his actors the ability to, wrap their own tongues around the dialogue, so to speak. And Paxton went to town, all that game over, man, game over.
Game over. Greatest,
yeah, that's famous. I mean, who referenced video games in that particular way prior to this? I mean, I know there'd already been The Last Starfighter, and video games had been in movies, but this was a reference from like just somebody who played video games, and that was part of their vernacular, and everybody understood what it meant. but yeah, the visual style of the film, the acting in the film, I confess I think Kyle Reese is a much more interesting character than Hicks. But Hicks is still like kind of the one that's keeping Ellen Ripley sane on this ship.
Yes. So yeah, obviously the role itself doesn't. He's he's not top billing, or he's not carrying the movie the way that he did in Terminator. But the thing is, in a movie full of larger than life personalities, or like just really dynamic characters, including Ellen Ripley, and then you have Bishop and the weird characters. Kyle Reese is this fucking like or not Kyle Reese, Corporal Hicks. He is straight ahead. He is like, he's reliable. He's the cool guy. I mean, I used to say this long before fan casting was ever a thing. I always thought Michael Biehn would make the perfect Cyclops because he has this sort of, very like matter of fact, we get shit done kind of personality. I think he had the look. But Corporal Hicks, especially when you're sitting next to Ellen Ripley, he had this like, you're in safe hands with Corporal Hicks. Like, this guy knows what the fuck he's doing. He doesn't fuck around. He's not Paxton. I mean, the movie has just so many cool characters.
He's not
Vasquez. Like, yeah, I mean, what a great ensemble characters.
Wait, I just have to point out, I was kind of crushed in later years to find out Vasquez was a part played in Brownface.
Dude, I was about to say, I believe the actress was actually Jewish, if I'm not mistaken, and she was not Mexican, but I sure believe she was Mexican at the time. So
yeah, still a great character.
She does phenomenal in the role. But with that said, like, there was a long time where I honestly felt like if you, to like a certain segment of either film nerds or whatever, guys our age, like in junior high school, name like the 5 coolest dudes, just cool guys from movies. Somebody was going to bring up Corporal Hicks just because he was perfect for that role, just as like the sort of reliable Marine that's not losing his shit. That's like, he just was cool. He just had a cool presence. He was more of a badass.
He made you feel safe. Like, he made you as an audience member feel safe. Like, shit's not going to go crazy as long as Corporal Hicks is there. And then when Corporal Hicks isn't there anymore, and
exactly,
famously, I mean, spoiler alert on a movie that everybody's seen, he survives this movie, but he doesn't survive the in-between to part 3. But he's taken out of commission in this movie, so that leaving it for Ellen Ripley to have her mano a mano standoff against the Queen, so to speak. Yeah. So when Hicks takes a blast of acid blood to his face and to his side or whatever, to his chest, that's what it was, to his chest, suddenly you're not safe in this movie anymore.
Yeah, and I think if you'd, I'm assuming most people who saw Aliens had seen Alien before, but like in Alien, like, they're a bunch of,
space truckers, space oil drillers, or,
they were all like kind of, they didn't take shit seriously, where, and Ellen, the difference too is like Ellen Ripley in Alien is a movie character. In Alien, she's a fucking superhero. Like, she is literally a action star, and rightfully so. And and that's not a criticism at all. It's just, she is badass to the next level. I mean, she literally gets into a big robot suit to fight the Queen. I mean, it's as cool as it gets. But in the first one, she's sort of kind of basically on her own as being the only capable one. So in this one, it was nice that she had like a partner, somebody that, could really like kind of almost her equal, even though, as you point out, nobody's on Ripley's equal because she took care of business. But yeah, it's a great movie. I feel like I've heard a lot of people these days now shit on Aliens and say it's not as good as Alien. And I like Alien. And I think Alien is a great haunted house in space, or a sci-fi horror movie or whatever. And it's great. And it's very well done. But that scene in Aliens, when all the Marines are sort of looking for the aliens, they're on their heat signature thing or whatever, and then what you think is just a wall behind them turns out to be a bunch of nesting aliens who start moving. That was a scary. I don't give a fuck. I watched every horror movie and available for rent at that point. That was the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my life. As somebody who hates cockroaches, seeing like 7.5 foot tall, like giant cockroaches, terrifying.
I agree. It is like a chilling movie. It's so perfectly paced too. You don't even feel how long it is because it's not a short movie. But I think the big difference between Alien and Aliens, I think you kind of nailed it. In the original, it's a bunch of people that are completely ill prepared to be dealing with the threat that they now face. They have no idea what they're doing. What's scary about Aliens is that this is the most prepared group of people that humanity has to offer.
These are the elite of the elite.
And they are dropping like flies. Did you know that there was actually another actor cast as Corporal Hicks prior to this movie? Like, to the point, cast, costumed, ready to go.
Oh, I do. Yes, I do. I do know that. Yes. A great character actor, too.
James Riemar.
Yep, James Riemar.
Who, to me, I guess a lot of people nowadays might think of him as Dexter's dad, or he's certainly that guy. Whenever I think of him, I think of the Warriors, and I think I always will.
Will always be, yeah.
And he's the bad guy in the Dream Team with Michael Keaton. But according to the myth, or maybe this is a true story, I don't know exactly what to believe when you find internet research. But according to the guy that plays Apone, Al Matthews, when Riemar was still in the role of Hicks, they were already starting to shoot. He was using some sort of a Model 37 pump action shotgun, it says. And he accidentally blew a hole in the set of Frank Oz's Little Shop of Horrors, being shot in the adjacent stage to Aliens at Pinewood Studios. And then, apparently Matthews says at that point he turned to Riemar and said, "Where the fuck did you get live ammo?" So Riemar was doing the unthinkable. He was loading his prop gun with live ammo, supposedly drunk, probably other things, and blew a hole in the set of Little Shop of Horrors and got himself fired and got Michael Biehn one of the most iconic roles that he ever had.
Yeah.
In another kind of bizarre casting, what if, but this one in a reverse order, Bill Paxton ended up being in Aliens. But do you know what movie he turned down to be in Aliens?
Nope.
He was going to be cast to play Zed in Police Academy 2, which went to Bobcat Goldthwait.
Oh my God. I
can't imagine. It would have been completely, he probably would have been like, what was his name? Chet in Weird Science. He was probably would have been a lot more bro-y. And
can I just say, and I fucking love the Police Academy movies, and I fucking love Bobcat Goldthwait, but Bill Paxton is too good for that shit. I mean, also, like, dude, yeah. I mean, Zed is one of I have the craziest love for Bobcat and for the Police Academy movie. So, but yeah, I've never heard that. That's insane. I'm now going to spend the rest of the night trying to imagine especially if he's playing this. I mean, I'm sure like once they hire Bobcat, so much of the character was based off of his stand-up character.
You would have had to have tailored it to Bobcat because his stage persona was so specifically Bobcat.
Yeah, and he basically brought that into that role, but except not as like a punk biker gang leader. But yeah, I mean maybe he was going to be more like Bill Paxton from Terminator. Maybe in fact, it was like going to be one of those like
laundry night, nothing clean, right?
Exactly.
But this time to Carrie Mahoney instead of the T-800. So to keep things moving forward, there's a movie I really want to see that I wish that I was able to talk about right now because I've been hearing about this movie since I first started subscribing to Fangoria magazine when I was in junior high.
Oh, I think I get to talk about this when you don't? Okay.
Are you talking about Rampage?
Rampage? I am talking about Rampage.
Okay, Now that I have a job, I can rent Rampage. I wasn't able to rent it prior to having the job. So now I'm going to have to go back. So convince me. William Friedkin directing, so I'm already on board for that. But tell me about Rampage.
So definitely watch it. It is a really interesting movie. There's a lot of, and honestly, I don't know which version I saw. The 87 cut or the 92 cut. I'm assuming it was the 92 cut because I think was the only one that was probably ever.
I'm not sure that there's a difference in the cuts. I think because the movie was shot and released in 87 overseas, something blocked it. I can't remember exactly what blocked it. Or here, let me see. Oh, because Dino De Laurentiis' entertainment group went bankrupt. So Friedkin did re-edit the film and changed the ending, and Miramax bought it and gave it a limited run in 1992 in the United States. So
yeah, and that's the thing. So because when he filmed it, he felt one way about the death penalty. Then when something happened and he had his mind changed about the death penalty, and so he went back and re-edited and changed the ending. So yeah,
Interesting.
definitely the one I saw was the 92. Well, first off, because it was Miramax, but I've heard it is. I've actually heard there is actually a few differences from the two versions, not just the ending. But either way, it's still the overall. I don't know if it was based off of Richard Ramirez, but I know it's based off of a true serial killer. I would just assume, given the year that the film was made, where it takes place, and then the sort of look of the character and a few of the elements. So, but it was based off a real serial killer. It's basically, the movie is about a serial killer, and Michael Biehn plays the prosecutor who, once he's caught, is trying to get him convicted. And it goes into, I think, a few things. First off, it is a really good movie. I think it's criminal that has never gotten any kind of, I mean, literally since like Laserdisc, I think it hasn't had any kind of release, physical media release, and this movie definitely deserves it.
I think Friedkin went from being hot to cold in the process between 87 and 92.
Yeah.
So
and
it didn't get the attention.
Again, I will say, if you're expecting the French Connection Exorcist level of artistry, you're not going to get that. It doesn't look like an older.
87 is in the range of To Live and Die in LA, though. That sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true. It looks almost more like a TV movie in a lot of ways. It looks cheap, but the movie, first off, so Michael Biehn is the sort of hero of he's not
the killer.
Yeah, he's not the killer. He's the hero DA or prosecutor. I can't remember exactly what his role is, but he's basically the guy that's, trying to get him convicted for how many homicides are in the movie. But the whole thing is, in this movie really leans in this idea of, is a psychopath who is schizophrenic, is he, it leans into the argument of being considered mentally unfit to stand trial versus, is it mental illness? Is it evil? Blah, blah, blah. First and foremost, I think, even though we're talking about Michael Biehn, the kid that plays the killer, Alex MacArthur, who I didn't really recognize from anything myself. It is surprising that we don't really know him because he is so good in this role. There's a scene where he basically is completely lost his shit that he's like very memorable. I will say the movie has an almost like an exploitation feel to it a little bit. Like it's like a step above exploitation in a way.
A lot of Friedkin kind of feels that way, though.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can definitely agree with that statement. But I'm very curious. The ending is very memorable, and like I won't give it away because you haven't seen it, but like it's making a very specific point, and I think some of the movie leans too much into that. It almost becomes like, is this a fucking PSA? Like, is it? But that's literally outside of the fact that the movie looks like a little cheap. I think it's really good. Michael Biehn is great in it. He's great in his role. There's some scenes where he's on trial, and I was like, you're getting to see Michael Biehn really stretch his actory muscles and stuff. I do think that the Alex MacArthur, actor who plays the killer, I think he sort of steals the movie, but definitely worth watching. Especially, like I said, to see Michael Biehn kind of play a different role from what he'd played at this point. Really good at it. Like, I will tell you this, just like The Fan, when I finished it, I was like, I want to own this movie. Unfortunately, unlike The Fan, you can't own the movie unless you go find an old VHS or the old Laserdisc, I guess. But it is.
But you can rent it, I believe, on Prime.
Yes, I rented it on Prime for $5.99. That's how I saw it. So, and like you, I think it was on Fangoria's 171 best movies you've never seen list or whatever.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've seen that list.
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely, and I think this is one of those rare movies where, because a lot of those lists, I'm like, don't tell me what I haven't seen. But in this case, it was one of those things where I'm like, because it had such a limited release, and didn't have a physical media presence like, most of the other sort of. And again, I definitely don't consider it a horror movie. In fact, it's almost, it is about a serial killer. I heard things online that says it's better than Henry and it's better than.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
I can't watch Henry on a regular basis, but it's a testament to that movie that I can't watch it on
exactly. Same. That movie fucked me up the first time I watched it.
Yeah. I've seen it 3 times, I think, and it still haunts me.
Did you see that?
I own it. So.
I was going to say, and did you see that new sweet-ass release that just came out, the box?
No, not yet. And I will probably pick it up because that's one of those movies that like I keep saying, if you don't pick these things up, they're going to go away and you're never going to get a chance to see them, because Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is never going to be like a regular Netflix algorithm movie. By its own nature, it kind of can't be. So,
and as society gets more and more, this is not me going off on a anti-PC tirade or whatever, but as society gets more and more, we'll say, sensitive to certain things, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is not for everybody. We'll just leave it at that. And very, very
dark, grisly. Yeah,
very hard to watch, for, even for somebody who likes horror and stuff. There's a moment.
Yeah.
And it's not even like it's purely the psychological impact, the emotional impact. There's a scene at the end of the movie with a suitcase that fucked me up for years. But anyways, we are not here to talk about that.
No.
As far as Rampage goes, well, it's not a perfect movie, and there's definitely some pacing issues. And some...
Again, that's a Friedkin...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love him, but he has not ever made a movie that I think was paced correctly.
I think Exorcist is paced fantastic, but I think some of that for me is just the first time I saw it, and a rare case of it wasn't a horror movie I grew up with. I think it was one of the few that my parents didn't want us to watch, and I didn't see it until I was like probably 15 or 16, and it was one of those rare movies I saw that lived up to the hype as far as being actually disturbing or scary. And I think whatever fault it may actually possess, that I seeing it in a more as an older adult, I might overlook just because the impact it had on me. But with that, this movie isn't as good as Exorcist or French Connection or whatever.
Very few things are as good as The Exorcist.
But it's definitely worth a watch. It's making an interesting point that isn't in most other movies, especially kind of thrillery kind of movies. And I think that, again, that Alex MacArthur guy, it's sad that he didn't have a bigger career and do bigger roles, because there is a moment, and I don't want to talk about it. We'll talk about it the next time we record, if you've seen it by then, because I really want to get your take on it. There's two scenes. There's a scene in a church, and then a scene at the very end of the movie that I'd be curious to get your take on, because
we should do a special episode where it's just us catching up with ourselves. Because I need to see Rampage, and you've been wanting to see What's Up, Doc.
Yes, which I've watched half of, or maybe a little more than half, so still haven't gotten around to finishing it.
And I wanted you to see California Split, too, because I want to have
that's right.
A discussion about George Segal as an actor, because I think that's the best kind of showcase of his particular set of skills.
I'm definitely down for that episode, so...
But I will definitely see Rampage. $5.99 is a drop in the bucket to, it's less than going to the movies. So I will check that out. I'll even try to see if I can't find both versions so that we can have.
I looked for the only place I saw it anywhere was on Amazon, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, then probably not then. But I will see the version that's on Prime. For the next film, I don't know. I'm a little torn here because one of these is a much better movie and all around, but we've already talked about this director. And the other movie is a much more Michael Biehn standard. And in both movies, he plays a particular position in the military. So I'm just going to say, because we've covered so much Cameron, and because we talked briefly about it in our 1989 sci-fi episode, maybe someday we'll come back in and do a whole thing on The Abyss.
Yeah.
But I think everybody that's listening right now is like, when are they going to get to Navy SEALs? So
everybody's on their seat for Navy SEALs.
A movie that I think is probably more famous now because of Kevin Smith putting the line in Clerks of the guy in the video store. Ooh, Navy SEALs.
Yeah, exactly.
I
have not seen Navy SEALs since watching it at my friend Robbie Gillum's house on HBO. I could not tell you a single. It's bad, and it's the cast is it's a bunch of people and there's some ridiculous scenes
Paxton's
in it.
Back.
What's up?
Bill Paxton is back.
Charlie Sheen's in it, right? Or am I crazy?
Charlie Sheen is
like the star, right?
Or at least his body's in it. I don't know if the rest of Charlie's there. I think the rest of Charlie is off somewhere fucking a hooker, and then he had his body show up to play the most unlikable rascal. Like right at the beginning, they have a scene that sets the tone for the whole fucking thing. They're going to the wedding of one of their Navy SEAL buddies. But anyways, they're going to his wedding, and Charlie Sheen's trying to talk him out of getting married because that's what a good friend does on the way to the wedding. Whereas Michael Biehn is like their commander, and he's telling them how happy he is for him, and they're driving along in their convertible. And at a certain point, they're like, if you don't want to come to the wedding, then don't come to the wedding. And Charlie Sheen just stands up in the backseat of the convertible and goes, okay, and like dives out of the convertible off of a bridge into the water below, where he then like swims away and then is called upon later when they need him to go on the mission. But I was just like, there's nothing cool about that. It is completely unbelievable that it can be done in the first place. I mean, sure, they had a stuntman do it, but what a stuntman can do is very different than what an actual Navy SEAL would do in their off time to be a jackass about their friend's wedding on the way to the wedding, by the way, with the other characters in tuxedos.
See, but this also needs to be
so
said.
Unlikable.
This was exactly at a time when action films, like the late 80s to the very early 90s, when action films were getting really dumb. They were all trying to be extra smart-assy and almost tongue-in-cheek, but just filled with douchebags and like,
There's no self-awareness to it. You can make a movie where every character is kind of more wisecracking than real life would be. I mean, I would say that there's stuff that Ryan Reynolds has done that kind of approaches that, or it can be done, but there has to be a self-awareness. This movie has no idea what it is. This may come as no surprise. It was no surprise when I discovered it. This was originally supposed to be a Cannon film. It was one of the ones that got cut off because Cannon bankrupted itself. But the idea of Navy SEALs as a Cannon film feels right. And it was supposed to star Kevin Bacon, but who knows? Cannon has a long history of casting actors before they're actually cast.
Yeah, that's right.
But it was originally going to be called SEALs, SEALS, like with the period in between.
Yeah, the acronym.
Acronym, yes. Yeah. And it's so desperately wants to be Top Gun at the same time.
Yes.
Bill Paxton apparently talked them out of shooting there's like this big scene. It's the one scene where the Navy SEALs get to go off and have fun and blow off some steam and be comrades in arms, outside of battle. And they all go golfing and they're fucking around in golf carts and stuff. And I think it's literally like a montage. It's a music montage. But Bill Paxton talked them out of it being a touch football scene because he's like, we're just doing the volleyball scene from Top Gun.
Yeah.
Let's at least make it golf. At least golf in 1990 was something you didn't see in every movie. And I guess the director said, okay, fine, and you direct it. So Paxton's second unit directed the golf scene purely based on the fact that he didn't want to play it as Top Gun. But the whole thing, like I just saw it again recently in order to get into this. And there's already plot points that I've forgotten. Like, I don't remember what Joanne Whalley-Kilmer's part was all about. I know she was a reporter and was trying to do a story on Navy SEALs and whatever, but I have no recollection of how her character ended up.
I don't think anybody can blame you for that, Devin.
It's just a really bad movie that is it's gotten its cult following despite the fact that it's bad. I mean, there are a lot of cult movies that are just bad and lovable bad. This movie is just goddamn bad.
I was going to rewatch it for this, and I literally just couldn't bring myself to do it. I was just like, I can't do it. It just doesn't. And, 90s action, wise-ass movie seems like it should be something I would totally be into, but just, it was one of those movies, even at the time, where I was like, ugh, this is so unlikable, and, like, it's sad. It's trying so hard to be this fun, like, cool movie, and it's just failing on every turn, so...
But yet it was so popular in 1990. I think the final thing to say on Navy SEALs is to quote Michael Biehn himself. Michael Biehn said that working on this film was, quote, probably the worst experience of my life.
Damn, okay.
Well, I think, working on a movie with Charlie Sheen at that time when Charlie Sheen was probably, just post Wall Street, and Charlie Sheen was on such a high, literally and figuratively at that point in time, and being taken very seriously considering how limited he is in his acting range.
Yes.
Charlie Sheen is perfect for some roles, but he has zero range. Charlie Sheen is great at playing Charlie Sheen. And I don't mean that in the same way that Christopher Walken is great at playing Christopher Walken or Jack Nicholson is great at playing Jack Nicholson. Charlie Sheen has one speed, and it's Charlie Sheen. And he's frequently the worst thing in the movie that he's in. But at the same time, he's this cult figure. And I don't hate him. For whatever reason, I don't hate him.
I mean, I hate the public persona of him, but I actually always thought I definitely see the appeal. He has a likable, like a scampy likability, like sort of. I just feel like I need to bring this up real quick because I just watched it like just maybe 4 or 5 days ago. I bought this movie just, I think it was Vinegar Syndrome. Now I'm forgetting where I bought it, but called Boys Next Door. It was I think it's Penelope Spheris, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it might even be her first movie.
She's very cool.
I mean, he's a super young fucking, maybe right after Ferris Bueller. But anyways, it's called Boys Next Door. It is Charlie Sheen and Maxwell Caulfield, who I think most people are only going to know from Grease 2.
I have a soft spot for Caulfield, actually.
I do too. And he is so basically they're Charlie Sheen and his best friend Maxwell Caulfield are these two kind of losery, kind of
they both have punchable faces.
Yeah. Oh, especially in this. But they basically play these two kind of like losery, wise-assy, kind of like going nowhere kids who nobody else in the school likes because they do these weird, they fuck with people and they're sort of, it's hard because first off, Maxwell Caulfield, a young Maxwell Caulfield in this, handsome as fuck still. He's jacked. He's playing this like high school senior. He's all like jacked and handsome, but he, without giving too much away, it opens up with all these it opens up with this whole thing about how all these famous serial killers, you would never think of them. You would never know they were serial killers when you meet them because they're so normal. And it's about these two boys next door. But the thing is, right away, something's wrong. Like, you would suspect them. First off, nobody likes them. Even though, Charlie Sheen's still, he was a heartthrob even at this point. But Maxwell Caulfield's super handsome, jacked, especially for that time. Nobody was in, good shape like he was. It's basically these two losers, leave town. They do some crazy shit, and they leave town. And it's just how they get more and more unhinged. And really, Maxwell Caulfield's character, he has something wrong with him. And it's got not like a twist ending, but it's got this kind of weird ending, which I still don't know how it would work, how it works. But it's actually a really fucked up movie in lots of ways. And Maxwell Caulfield's performance is so intense. And I would never have believed the dude from Grease 2 could give this performance or play this kind of character and actually have it work. But anyways, if you ever get a chance to see it, The Boys Next Door, Penelope Spheris, I think 88, maybe 87.
I would see it for the Spheris and the Caulfield.
Yeah, as you should. And definitely.
And I don't hate Sheen. Maybe I was a little hard on Sheen there, but his brother was so much better, and his brother doesn't act so much.
85. So yeah, it would have been right around.
That's like pre-Platoon.
Yeah, exactly. And he's he's super young looking, and it might even been before. Maybe it was even before Ferris Bueller. But anyways, definitely worth a watch. Very interesting movie. I bought it because I don't know if it's Vinegar Syndrome or who had it, but I read the synopsis and I read that it was Penelope Spheris, and I was like, oh, that's fucking interesting. I'll check that out. And it was good. Very interesting movie. Kind of goes to some crazy places. Interesting little flick. Anyways, that's my side tangent.
I've got a couple of things to pick up, but I've got one. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend you see it. It's the next Michael Biehn film. The same year as one of his star-making movies. It's a little movie, an independent movie called Deadfall. Have you seen Deadfall?
I have not. It's when I was reviewing his movies, I wanted to see it because it sounded interesting. So
it is awful. It is seriously one of the most uneven movies, but you can see its intentions all the way through, which I always kind of, depending on the movie, on the bad movie, I kind of love it when I can see the intentions and I can kind of get behind the intentions and root for it, even though I know it's not very good. This time, Michael Biehn's actually playing the lead, and it's kind of a noir film. Basically, Michael Bihn's character is involved in a scam where they're trying to do a fake drug deal so that they're going to take it right to the edge where the person who is buying the drugs thinks that they're buying the drugs, and then they have a whole thing rigged where the cops are going to show up, and it turns out that the guy who is selling the drugs has a wire on him, and it scares the drug purchaser away, therefore leaving his money behind. And of course they aren't real cops, and there's no danger, and nobody's actually shot. It's all a setup by this kind of con syndicate. I don't even want to say a crime syndicate. They're just a bunch of con men. And Michael Bihn's father in the film is James Coburn. And in this sort of ruse that they are setting up at the beginning of the movie, the idea is that Michael Biehn is supposed to shoot the guy who's dealing them drugs when he finds a wire on him. And after the dust is settled and the guy that they're scamming has run away and taken the car and is far away from them, everybody who was quote unquote shot gets up, and they all gather around, they start counting the money, but James Coburn's still on the ground. And so his son, Michael Biehn, goes over to him and, Dad, what's wrong? Turns out, of course, he had real bullets in his gun, but he didn't put real bullets in his gun. Who did it? It's very upsetting to him that he killed his own father in this little scam. But the last thing his father says is, "Find my brother and bring back the cake." She has no idea what the hell that means. His dad has never mentioned that he had a brother before, but he finds the brother, and he goes out to California to meet the brother. And of course, the brother is played by none other than James Coburn. So maybe you can tell me if this is in any way plausible. Is it possible to have a twin and keep it a secret from your son for his entire life?
I mean, I've only met my niece once, so I mean,
Okay.
Who knows?
but Julian knows that you have a twin, right?
Yes, of course.
Your
yes.
son knows.
And I hope my niece knows that. Yeah.
Right. So it just gets more and more implausible from there as you start to wonder who's conning who, or actually you don't wonder it. You figure it out pretty easily on your own who's conning who. You just get to watch it unfold and how are they going to do it. What's really special about this movie is it's directed by Christopher Coppola. And of course, Christopher Coppola, we hear his name and immediately think, oh, he must be related to Francis Ford Coppola. And he is. He's his nephew. But you know whose brother he is? Nicolas Cage. So he cast Nicolas Cage to play kind of the wild guy that works for James Coburn's brother, James Coburn. It's really just the most unhinged con man you've ever seen. It's his brother either let him go completely wild or was completely unable to rein him in. This is in the top 3, I think, of the craziest roles I've ever seen Nicolas Cage play.
And that's saying a lot.
It's okay. According to the story, Nicolas Cage came onto the set dressed in a wig with albino contact lenses and dark sunglasses because he thought it would add more authenticity to his character of a 2-bit hustler. I don't know any albino hustlers myself. I don't know about the authenticity angle. But anyways, his brother did manage to tell him to tone it down, but by toning it down, he still has on a crazy wig, the dumbest fake mustache you've ever seen, a big nose that probably came off of, it looks like it came off of Groucho glasses.
I was gonna say I have some Groucho glasses.
I wish I could show you. Look up a still. Look up.
I will. Yeah.
Look it up now because I want your reaction. Look up Nicolas Cage in Deadfall. I know that this is supposed to be about Michael Biehn, but really, Nicolas Cage is always one of my favorite segments, non sequiturs.
Oh my god, I did not know. So like I said, this movie looked interesting. I did not know that was Nick Cage. What the fuck? He almost looks like Tony. Oh god, what's the character Tony or not Tony Schiff? I'm blanking on the goddamn. Thank you very much.
Tony Clifton.
Clifton. He looks like Tony Clifton.
He's been compared to Tony Clifton, and he has all the charm of Tony Clifton, and his voice his vocal choice in this movie is right up there next to Peggy Sue Got Married.
Oh my God.
His relatives really let him do too much with the voice.
I actually just read the greatest quote about Peggy Sue Got Married of Nicolas Cage. He said that Cher told him when she wanted him to be in Moonstruck, she's like, I saw your performance in Peggy Sue Got Married, and it was like two cars crashing into each other. And Nicolas Cage said, and I found that to be a very big compliment.
Dude's amazing. And he takes it all so seriously, and that's really, he doesn't take himself so seriously, but he takes his job seriously.
Yes.
And he never phones it in. And that's the thing I love about it. He's giving his all to everything, and he's the only reason to really watch this movie. Michael Bihn's fine. It's fun to see him play a lead. Yeah. But like I said,
it's hard when you're next to Tony Clifton, Nick Cage, to be the focus of attention. So
yeah, it's something else, and it is out there. People can find this movie. I just bought a digital copy because I don't know if it's even on Blu-ray, but I don't know that I need it until if it'd be right up the alley of like a Vinegar Syndrome or something like that to do this movie, and I would definitely throw down and buy the disc if it was that. If it's just like a Lionsgate no frills thing, then I'm going to be happy with my digital copy. But before we move on from it, I want to tell you the cast list.
I saw that's why when I was looking it up, the cast is incredible.
This is Christopher Coppola, of course, so already we've got a name behind the camera. But all these people, they it's hard to say anybody cameos in this movie. There's cameos, but there's also not cameo. It's weird. But aside from Nicolas Cage and Michael Biehn and James Coburn, you've got Charlie Sheen, Peter Fonda. Talia Shire, another Coppola, of course, Michael Constantine, Clarence Williams III, Mickey fucking Dolenz from the Monkees. And
what?
Just to make it all the more absurd, one of the supporting characters, in fact, one of the villains in this movie, the next Mark that they're going after, is played by Angus Scrimm with a bionic claw arm.
Look, I know you prefaced this movie by saying it's awful, but I don't think I've wanted to see a movie this bad in my life. You could not sell a movie more to me than everything you've said in the last 10 minutes. Angus Scrimm with a bionic... I was actually really heartbroken. I did not know that was not his real name. I always thought that was the coolest name, and it's a stage name. But anyways.
But he's still Angus Scrimm to me.
But he's still Angus Scrimm.
Boy. The tall man from Phantasm. But in this,
I literally have tears in my eyes.
He's got
Mickey
a
Dolenz
lobster claw hand that, doesn't seem like why the fuck would you get a lobster claw hand sort of thing? Like a big metal one. Like you can't hold shit with it. That's not, get a fucking hook or go with the stump. Why there's no purpose. But he's a jeweler. So he has he's quirky, he's weird. He has all these scantily clad women around him, and they all hold these little eyelet things up for him so he can inspect his diamonds, which just goes to prove how pointless his claw hand is again. But what's great about this movie, though, and I don't know much about Christopher Coppola outside of that he is Nicolas Cage's brother and Francis Ford Coppola's nephew, and I'm sure he's a nice guy and whatever. But everybody else that I just mentioned on that list is an incredibly talented person. Like, this is not a list of, oh my God, how stupid is this? This is a list of oh my God, Clarence Williams III, hey, Mickey Dolenz, the Monkees.
Oh, I love Mickey Dolenz. It's just not a name I would have expected.
No, he's part of the crew. He's part of the con man crew that James Coburn 2 has out in California. And Charlie Sheen plays a pool hustler named Fats, who just, it's so bad. He just talks about Mark Twain at one point. It makes no sense. He just mentions Mark, something about Mark Twain used to play this, helped him think. He wrote Huckleberry Finn and my favorite Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court. And you feel like Charlie Sheen's maybe ad-libbing this stuff and trying to prove to you that he knows who Mark Twain is. He's like, also known as Samuel Clemens. Like,
he just read the Wikipedia page.
Well, this is before Wikipedia.
But I'm saying,
he just learned that and thought, wow, if my character is supposed to be smart, I should be talking about things that nobody else knows about, like that Samuel Clemens is actually Mark Twain.
I don't think I've ever wanted to see a movie more in my life.
Seriously, see Deadfall and then call me. Don't even text. I want to know. Let's
leave you a long, rambling, drunken voice text.
You will love it. I guarantee you. You will love this.
Oh my God, that is! I can't believe I've never seen this movie.
So
Tony Clifton, Nick Cage. God damn, dude. This was worth the whole podcast. Is just talking about this movie I haven't even seen.
Yeah, Deadfall, 1993. Make sure you get the 93 version. There's Deadfall is apparently not a rare name for movies.
I also saw that, yes.
So make sure you're getting the 1993 version with. We can't miss it if you see Nicolas Cage anywhere on there. Although you might not think it's Nicolas Cage if you're just glancing at it.
Like I said, I even saw the poster art and I didn't know that was Nick Cage.
Not exactly a master of disguise, but oh my God. So as far as Michael Biehn is concerned, he does fine in the role. It's not even as bad as I'm making it out. It's just when you have that lineup and you're not perfection, I think it's just
that should have been like
bad.
the 1993 version of Ocean's 11. Like it should have been with that cast and that talent. You'd think like this is going to be,
and it's not. It's poorly directed. It really is poorly. Like the music is really weird. It's all odd. It's far too quiet at points. Like almost like they have no score to it. But there is one. You can tell he's very much trying to be a film noir and play tribute to film noir. And there's a set piece set on the carousel at the Third Street, or not Third Street Promenade, the Santa Monica Pier. Nearby the promenade. Because the carousel setting was, these characters are going round and round. It's the whole thing is just a pseudo intellectual exercise of someone who I feel like must have been in his early 20s.
Yeah.
And for that, I will give him a pass because I probably would have done the same in my early 20s, trying to make a noir film that was deep and like, they're not fooling anybody. You can read the plot in about 3 seconds as it starts, like, what's going to happen. But you don't know what exactly. That's the unpredictability. The unpredictability is fucking Nicolas Cage, Angus Scrimm, and Mickey Dolenz, and Clarence Williams III. It's just like, what the hell is going on? Why? And Coburn's having a lot of fun too.
Devin, we've talked a lot about on this podcast, and we've talked off the podcast about having some merchandise for the show. I think our first shirt just needs to just say on it Angus Scrimm with a robot claw. That's all I think we need. Like, everybody will be like, "What the fuck?" And then the first person that wears it, that somebody's like, "Deadfall." That's instant best friend material, right? Like that's
exactly. It's not just a T-shirt; it's a test.
Exactly.
But that same year, 1993, Michael Biehn made arguably his most. I don't want to say his most important, because Terminator and Aliens are certainly important. But Tombstone really did spin him in a different direction, and he kind of started to become a different actor at that point. And I know that he was going through his own personal stuff too, but he plays Johnny Ringo. And let me tell you, we all in 93, you went and saw that movie because of Kurt Russell and how fucking badass the whole movie is.
Yep.
But the reason we talk about it now, the reason why it's remembered as anything positive, is Michael Biehn and Val Kilmer.
Yep. Look, so it was actually Johnny Ringo that made me want to do this podcast. And first off, what a fucking cast. Without Michael Biehn, the cast. To play a heavy in a movie. And he's like the Boba Fett. He's not the Darth Vader. He's not the boss. That's Powers Booth.
Well, he kind of is the Darth Vader, and Powers Booth is kind of the Emperor.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point. Oh, that's a good point. Actually, that's even a better point. I like that. And Powers Booth is great in it. The whole cast is great. Fucking Sam Elliott, everybody's great in the role they play. But for you to be the heavy in a movie with fucking Kurt Russell with the dopest mustache in film history,
yes,
and Val Kilmer in one of the greatest roles in cinema history, one of the greatest performances, and you not only stand your own, but you stand out in your own way, that you were such a badass character and such a great character that you like, you actually kind of worry a little bit for
Johnny Ringo.
No, but I know you the famous, I'll be your Huckleberry. Why can't Wyatt Earp is Kurt Russell.
Doc Holliday is
Doc Holliday, thank you. Mine
because it's such a stacked cast. I'm like, I don't know which one you're trying to
exactly, and they're historical characters, blah blah blah. But goddamn, Johnny Ringo is such a badass, and like he's legitimately scary. He's legitimately, and even though Doc Holliday's just a little bit better, it's right there, and he's so ruthless, and you see that bloodlust. He is genuinely terrifying. I literally, when I rewatched it, and it's one of the greatest tough guy movies ever. I mean, it's everybody should love it. It's just one of those movies that like literally is almost flawless. All the lingo in it, and like even though there's like there's some sad you see Wyatt Earp is kind of a scut, like his wife is anyways. But it's all again historical. And I don't know how. I do not claim to have any kind of expertise on the actual the Old West history, but
it is not at all accurate.
No, I didn't have. I was going to say.
I'll get into that in a second. You tell because there's a story behind its accuracy.
Yeah, but goddamn, all the dialogue, all the characters are all so fucking tough, and the last 30 minutes is just badass. But
the last 4 minutes, this movie is so awesome that when the credits start to roll, the entire credit sequence is the 4 lead characters walking together down the street. Showing off their mustaches and their chins. And it's just close up after close up of the actors you've watched through for the last 2.5 hours. And it's the dumbest thing I've ever seen, but every time I will not turn it off until that sequence is done. I will watch those fuckers walk for 4 straight minutes, just looking hard because it works. I don't know why, but it
does. But I've seen the movie a million times. In fact, I rewatched it maybe a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, but I had just rewatched it maybe 2 months before that. But I watched it specifically, and Michael Biehn is fucking great in it. Like I said, it's weird because you think of him as like Kyle Reese and Hicks, and you see him as that character, but to see him as the bad guy, and he's so fucking good in it. But even rewatching it, there's so many layers to his character, and like he's when he's scared, but he's trying to not be scared. There's just all these different.
That's just it. Like, and again, the power of being, the weird sensitivity. This is the movie where his sensitivity was erased and he was just hard, except for the moments where he's up against Holiday.
Yep.
And in a battle of words, he can play his own, which is why they had the back and forth in Latin and everything.
Yeah.
The classic scene. But whenever it comes down to like actual draw, you see it in his eyes that he's scared shitless.
He's scared shitless, yes, because he knows that even dying of tuberculosis, you don't fuck with Doc Holliday. God damn! I mean, I just had to say, having watched the documentary on Val Kilmer and knowing Val Kilmer was problematic and stuff in the past in different roles, and I don't know if you saw the documentary about Val Kilmer.
Yet. I really want to.
It is really good. Even when you're a kid and a movie is special or a performance is special, and you're like, I want to be that fucking guy. For so many people, Doc Holliday, Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday, it is. I said it, and I'm not kidding or exaggerating. It is one of the greatest performances and roles in film history.
Well, again, almost, and this is why they kind of play perfect parallels to each other, Biehn and Kilmer.
Yeah,
you've got the Earp brothers. These 3 badass dudes with badass mustaches and badass reputation and all that. And who are we cheering for? Who are our eyes drawn to? The fucking weakling who's in the process of dying.
Yep.
Because somehow he's tougher than all of them. And that's not the character. That's Val Kilmer. That's what he brings to that script. And he's just every line, and some of his dialogue is historically accurate. For example, his dying words, the real Doc Holliday's real dying words were "I'll be damned," which people suspect was because he died without his boots on, and he always thought he would die with his boots on. So he looks down at his own bare feet and says, "I'll be damned," and dies. He also legit said at the gunfight at the OK Corral, when he was out of ammo, and I think it was Ike Clanton was aiming at him, and he said, "You're a daisy if you do." That was apparently a real thing from Doc Holliday, which is a great line. Yeah. And I actually read an explanation that I found interesting too for his "I'm your Huckleberry," which I think is maybe the most famous. That, or "I'm in my prime."
Yeah, but I'll be your Huckleberry, I think, is the most famous.
Yeah. Val Kilmer even named his book "I'm Your Huckleberry," and it was debated for years and years whether he was actually saying that. A lot of people thought he was saying Hucklebearer because that was a thing. Apparently, in the West, or at least in that time period, the handles on the side of a casket were called huckles, and so your pallbearers would be holding huckles. And so for stepping out into a gunfight, for someone to say, "I'll be your hucklebearer" to the guy that he's going to go fight alongside with is not a illegitimate thing to say. Like,
makes sense. Absolutely.
But Val Kilmer stepped up and said, "No, it said in the script, and I said in the movie, I'm your huckleberry." But there's no real, like, it sounds Western authentic, because so does, when Wyatt Earp tells him to, skin your...
Why don't you go and jerk that smoke wagon, see what happens?
Yeah. Skin it. You gonna do something, or you're just gonna stand there and bleed?
The greatest. Oh man.
Billy Bob Thornton too.
Yep.
But anyways, the line "I'll be your huckleberry," I think stems from the fact that they're really trying to push Doc Holliday as an educated man. He knows Latin. He's quoting classic literature. "I'll be your huckleberry" is actually a reference to Tom Sawyer. When Wyatt Earp needs a sidekick, "I'll be your huckleberry," or "I'm your huckleberry."
Yeah.
That's what the line means. I mean, it's just a hypothesis. Nobody actually knows, but that's
is the screenwriter dead?
Yes, he is, as a matter of fact.
I was going to say.
He was originally going to be the director too.
Oh, really?
Kevin Jarre, I maybe Jarre, I believe is.
Yeah, I think it's probably Jarre.
But yeah, he was a screenwriter, and this was going to be his directorial debut, and he labored over it and wrote this true epic that was really covering the true story of the Earps, but with all the dark side. It was something that Kurt Russell described as the Godfather of Westerns. So it was going to be about the Earps moving into Tombstone, taking over the game table at the Oriental, and starting to basically rule the town, and going up against the cowboys, the outlaws and the red sashes, was meant to be going up against a rival gang, and they were going to be played like gang versus gang rather than justice versus outlaw. And they were going to show all the ways that the Earp brothers took advantage and kind of, came in and said, "Hey, I'm going to take your table and take 25% of your, take at the door," or whatever. And won his silver mine in a card game and stuff like that. It wasn't that they came in and worked for what they got. They kind of came in and took it. And on top of that, refused to help out when the town seriously had some law problems. And it's not their problem if they're retired from law enforcement, but you see it even when Wyatt Earp first meets the leader of the Cowboys, Powers Booth. He lets him win, or he lets him take his $500, which is kind of what keeps the peace for a while. And he turns a blind eye to a lot of it until it starts to affect his family. So the Godfather reference really does make sense. And the fact that the love story in the movie is really the only thing about the movie that's out of place in a weird way, but you can't tell the Earp story without having him fall in love with the actress. But it's an affair, and it doesn't paint Wyatt in a good light, but the rest of the movie's trying to paint Wyatt in a good, I'll get to that. It wasn't all meant to be like that. It was meant to show the Earps as kind of real assholes. Yeah, real. And the problem was this director, Kevin Jarre, he lost control of the movie. He kept on doing every shot as if it was an epic, and it took all this time to set up, and he didn't want to do any close-ups, so he would have the actors all standing in the master shot. And if any one of them screwed up, they'd have to start over. And they asked, "Why don't you shoot close-ups?" He's like, "Well, if I shoot close-ups, then they'll take it away from me in the editing room." And I want to do, and he became his own worst enemy because he got fired because he wasn't doing the job he was supposed to do as a director. He was doing it defensively. And he apparently did shoot some of the movie. All the Charlton Heston stuff is him.
Okay.
And some of the town stuff is him. You can see, I mean, my guess is probably the stage production scene, because that's a little long anyways. That was probably him. So he's in there, but they got rid of him in the middle of production, and the movie was already expensive. And so Kurt Russell kind of becomes by default in charge. He at first on his short list thinks I got to get John Carpenter, which, my God, John Carpenter's Tombstone is one of the movies that will always exist in the back of my mind as like one that got away.
Especially knowing how much Carpenter wanted to make a Western. So
yes, and the fact that it would have been a Western with his Kurt Russell, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I say it as if Carpenter owns Kurt Russell, but in a weird way, I think he does.
Yeah.
But no, not meant as a disrespect to Kurt Russell, obviously.
No.
But in the same way that John Wayne really belonged to John Ford. Eventually, they realized how fucked up this was, and Kurt Russell decided, I'm going to have to take this on myself, and I'm going to have to direct it. But I don't want credit for it because I'm going to have to cut the hell out of it, including my own part. He like took to the screenplay with a red pen and made sure that he cut more of his part than anybody else's, which on the one hand sounds noble, but also keep in mind, he's cutting out the stuff that makes his character look like an asshole and turning him into an absolute badass.
Yeah.
So there's a take and a give to that. And then he goes to Sly Stallone and says, do you know anybody who can kind of shadow direct this or ghost direct this? And Sly recommends his old buddy, George Cosmatos, who quote unquote directed Rambo 2 Rambo First Blood Part 2 and your favorite movie, Cobra.
Yeah, that's right.
Which we all know Stallone directed those movies.
Yes.
We need to do an episode on George Cosmatos because we should probably go through all of these and discuss which ones of these did he actually direct. And I'm sure he had some say, and I'm sure he wasn't completely disrespected on the set, but every story I hear involving this guy, and his son is a visionary, directed Andy. So I don't mean to be insulting.
No, if you see the backstage shit especially for Cobra, you can kind of tell what's happening. And honestly, if like documentaries, people didn't have a lot of great things to say about him. They said he was very short tempered and he would yell on set and he'd get really easily flustered. But at the same time, like if you're trying to direct a movie and then the star is basically really directing it and kind of telling you what to do, I don't know. It's funny. I do a zine called Dream Evil, all about movie villains and movie monsters, movie villains. And I was going to expand it into a more of a full-on cult film thing. And to make my point, I was actually, because I find George Cosmatos so interesting and like you said, his film history, I was going to try to write up an article to go in this zine, and because I just find it so interesting and him so interesting. And yes, he directed my favorite movie of all time. So, or he quote unquote directed it, but I would love to do an episode. It would be very interesting to me. So
yeah, maybe we can get down to the bottom of like what is his style. Maybe we can pull together. We're like, well, this movie has this and this movie has this, so maybe this is him. Yeah, he's kind of fascinating in that respect, and I don't blame him for being a dick on the set if this is the way he's being treated.
Yep.
But it sounds like it was also a very open secret in Hollywood. Like, hey, I need a guy who can take the blame for this if it sucks.
Exactly.
But he did a fine job. But yeah, everybody, it's kind of interesting. Kurt Russell has admitted this in an interview after he said that he kept it a secret until after Kevin Jarre and George Cosmatos had passed away. But he finally admitted, yeah, I really directed Tombstone. And a bunch of people stepped up and were like, yes, especially Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer stepped up and said, there is no Tombstone without Kurt Russell. He did this amazing job. He sacrificed for all of us. He turned in that performance while still worried about the shot lists and everything on a project that was literally falling apart simultaneous to the production. It was an immense amount of skill. And then you get to Michael Biehn, whose only quote on it is, Kurt Russell never directed me.
Interesting.
I don't know. There's ways to interpret this because I don't. Yeah. Everything I've read about Biehn, he doesn't seem like an unfair person. He certainly doesn't seem like a person that doesn't like Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
He does have some problems with, he studied really hard and trained really hard to do this as historically accurate. And the historically accurate side of this movie just went completely away.
Yeah.
Well, I won't say completely. Like I said, there was little touches like the lines that Doc Holliday delivers, and Wyatt Earp really did walk into the middle of the creek and shoot Curly Joe point blank like that superhero shit that he does, apparently based on the truth.
That's so bad. And it's funny. I do know that specifically was real. And I remember when I found out it was real, I was like, God damn that. Cause that's, even though it's written the way that they're reacting to it, like, holy shit, are you watching this? Like, oh, yeah. God damn. It's so tough.
But yeah, the accuracy was basically blown. And so I would love to find out what Michael Biehn really thinks of this movie. I'm sure he's not displeased with it, but I don't think he's as proud as he could be. And I don't know whether, yeah, I agree. But he's also said his famous line that, I want your blood, I want your soul, and I want it now. It was out of focus. So the I want it now line, you can see it in the trailers. He says it, you can see from behind the ERPs. You can see his face saying it. But in the movie, it's from behind Michael Biehn. So his moment gets cut off because the director shot it out of focus. And I think he's still pissed about that. But which understandable.
Yeah, exactly.
But hey, there's a version of it out there and it's memorable, But I don't even know that what he was saying was a slight against Kurt Russell. I think it may actually could be interpreted as a positive thing because Kurt Russell had so much going on and he knew that his actors had done the research because he had to do the same research, that he probably didn't direct the actors very much at all. He was directing the rest of the movie. So the movie that you see was Kurt Russell, but the performances you see belong to Michael Biehn and Val Kilmer and Michael Rooker and Sam Elliott and Bill Paxton once again.
Powers Booth.
Oh, he's so good.
Yeah. So hateable.
Bill Brocious. What a great name. But yeah, it's such Stephen Lang as Ike Clanton. Apparently Michael Bihn's on some sort of a campaign right now to try to get Ike Clanton's body exhumed and moved to Boot Hill in Tombstone? That's where, he wants Ike Clanton to be buried in Boot Hill because according to Biehn and according to history generally, the Earps were the aggressors in the OK Corral, and that the Clanton brothers were maybe not innocent men, but weren't criminals. They weren't gangsters in the Old West. So
I didn't.
The lore kept Ike Clanton from being buried, in where his family is in Boot Hill. And so he's trying to get, because they don't bury anybody in Boot Hill, obviously, anymore. It's a tourist attraction. Yeah. But he's trying to get the body put in its proper place. Probably be really interesting to talk to him about it. But yeah, what a movie. For all of its flaws. And it was also originally cast as Kurt Russell. This is the stuff of legends. It was Kevin Costner, who also loved the idea of the long version of the Wyatt Earp story and tried to do his own. And as far as I know, there's no bad blood between Kurt Russell and Kevin Costner. They even acted together a couple years later as Elvis impersonators in 3,000 Miles to Graceland, which I remember being kind of a decent movie. But yeah, that was one of the examples of two movies really competing. And this is why Kurt Russell really had to hustle to get this movie out and to make it better than the version that Kevin Costner was making, who's a much bigger star at the time than Kurt Russell was.
Yeah.
And certainly Dennis Quaid was a much bigger star than Val Kilmer was.
Yeah.
And what's his name directed it? Or at least wrote it.
I never saw it
Lawrence Kasdan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, I would never see it because fuck Kevin Costner.
Yeah, I know you don't like him, and I don't love him. He's not the same turnoff to me that he is to you, but I get it. I totally get it.
I feel like everyone else loves him except for me.
I do not love him. I would not call myself a Costner fan, but I am also not a Costner hater. I just think he's really boring and bland, and I have a very hard time. I'm sure if I sat down and really thought about it, I could come up with something, but I don't think he's ever been the best thing about whatever movie he's in.
Nope. I don't. I mean, not in a good way.
Yeah. He was pretty good in Perfect World, the Clint Eastwood
film. Yeah.
But it was the Wyatt Earp movie was the movie that Tombstone initially set out to be, and was less successful, was less liked. It really wasn't. It was a misfire. And Kurt Russell was right. In 1993, we needed this to kind of, I think, finally close the book on the epic John Ford kind of Western. I mean, there's plenty of Sam Peckinpah in this movie too, and the relationships between the men is pure Howard Hawks. I mean, there's so much influence, but I think the world needed, especially after Unforgiven kind of closed the book on that era of Westerns. Tombstone was necessary after Unforgiven, just to kind of give one last shout out to the epic.
Yeah.
And after that, it became Dead Man, and even 3:10 to Yuma is not your typical Western. It's a very good movie. But I think the 1-2 punch of Unforgiven and Tombstone kind of laid to rest that classic style.
Yes, I agree 110%. So obviously there's so many more Michael Biehn movies. He was very prolific. We never got to talk about Seventh Sign, which is an interesting movie. It's not a great movie.
I haven't seen it since I was a kid, and I think even then my feeling was like it was a ripoff of Rosemary's Baby.
It's such a weird. It's not a horror movie. You think it's a horror movie, and it's not. In fact, it's the ending is sad but hopeful, or like touching, and the villain. It's a weird movie. It's
I wanted to see it. I didn't get around to it. It was another rental movie, and I would have seen it if we had just done this a month later. But
if anything, as a kid, I didn't like it because it was misleading. Because I thought it was going to be like super dark and scary, and it really wasn't. It's kind of misleading, and I think that's even the point of the movie, is that you think this guy, the stranger, is one person, or is I don't want to spoil it, but anyways.
Well, is Biehn in it very much? Because I primarily remember Demi Moore.
Yeah, it's definitely, he's a smaller role. He plays Demi Moore's husband, who's a doctor, and he's bland in it. And he's not in it much, and he's kind of, his role, he's not bland, but his role is very bland. He's like playing second fiddle to Demi Moore, and I don't want to say who the character is, but the stranger. But yeah, exactly. And that's another reason why I'm okay with not bringing it up, because he's got a prominent role, but he doesn't do much in the film, and he's not given much to do. But yeah, there's tons of movies more, but I feel like this is a
very long podcast. I think we should at least give a shout out to Planet Terror by Robert Rodriguez, part of the Grindhouse double feature. Partly because I think this was a really influential movie on Michael Biehn. And I'll get to why in a second. I did rewatch Planet Terror. I'd seen it a couple of times. I'm probably one of the only people that actually saw Grindhouse twice in the theater. Because I had an opportunity to take a date to go see it at the drive-in the second time around. And I'm like, dude, Grindhouse at the drive-in, like that has to be a thing.
Yeah.
So the date didn't go very well, but I enjoyed myself very much.
That's all that matters.
But don't take a date to go see a Tarantino movie ever. It's just not in modern day anyways. In 94, if you were taking them to Pulp Fiction, then that's fine. But I don't think, Hateful Eight would have been a particularly good date movie either.
See, I disagree, but
I took my wife to see Hateful Eight, and she still hasn't forgiven me. I liked the movie, but I need to rewatch it because I had to be filtered through my wife, like how this movie was so stupid. Why,
it's become one of my favorites and most watched of his. But especially that it's almost like a mini series, the super long cut.
Yeah, I do want to see that.
Walton Goggins is so fucking good, and it's really, I think, one of his where he really gets to be 100% Walton Goggins. So
he's great in anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't have shade on that movie, but I've realized that the Tarantino worship, as I've gotten older, I've started to realize more and more the Tarantino worship seems to be a primarily male thing. So it's kind of interesting to me. It makes total sense. But anyways, Planet Terror, that's neither here nor there outside of the fact that Tarantino plays a scumbag in it. It's weird. It was hard to watch it again because, of course, it famously is the movie that Robert Rodriguez did for the Weinstein Company, starring his then wife, Rose McGowan.
Wait, hold on.
Planet Terror?
Yeah, Rose McGowan was married to who?
Robert Rodriguez.
What?
They were at least going out. But I think they married.
Are you sure? I've never heard that.
Pretty much positive, yeah. Well, now I'm not sure. Look it up.
Dang, dude, because I was a big Rose McGowan fan. So.
Well, I think, as am I, but...
she was dating, so... McGowan, she was in a 3.5-year relationship with Marilyn Manson, of course. After formal engagement, the last 2 years, McGowan ended the relationship. There was speculation that McGowan was dating director Robert Rodriguez. In 2007, it was reported that they confirmed their relationship while appearing hand-in-hand at the Cannes Film Festival. And then she became engaged to artist Davey Detail. But yeah, they were dating. They weren't married, but they were dating, which was news to me.
They were an item while they were making this. And I
But
know
yes.
that there were discussions going on because it was going to be produced by Weinstein, and she had told Rodriguez her story about Weinstein. Yeah, Weinstein assaulted her, and basically blackballed her from the industry, or at least doing anything in Miramax. And which, let's face it, like Rose McGowan was kind of made to be a Miramax type actress.
Yeah.
Very indie, very cool.
Yeah.
And Rodriguez makes it sound like this was my revenge against Weinstein because I cast her because this was Bob Weinstein's movie, and Bob Weinstein couldn't tell me that I can't have Rose McGowan because then he would have to admit what Harvey did. So that he makes it seem like this was some sort of a revenge thing, which to me just sounds like a rationale of I really want to make this movie, and the Weinsteins are the only ones that are going to make it. But the fact that there's weird sex scenes in it, like Rose McGowan does not. This is not a good movie for her. When I first saw Grindhouse, I preferred Planet Terror so much more than Death Proof. Now looking back on it over 10 years later, and with eyes a lot more open, Death Proof is so much better than Planet Terror. Planet Terror actually is rather lazy. It's not a Grindhouse movie. It's he admits it's based off of John Carpenter and that sort of thing, which John Carpenter is not a Grindhouse director.
Nope.
The missing reel scene where you cut 10% of the movie, an entire 10 minutes is cut in the movie because they do a missing reel gag. It was essentially laziness. That was running long. There were never in Grindhouses. There weren't missing reels. You find missing reels when you buy Grindhouse movies now because reels have gone missing. But part of the experience of seeing it in the theater, you might have missing shots. A lot of nudity was cut because some projectionist would clip it out either for their own gains or because the community wanted them to cut that out.
Yep.
So there would be a lot of shots missing, but there were never reels missing from an entire movie. So even his funniest gag doesn't really make sense. And I just have to say, Planet Terror does not stand up to me. But what does stand up in Planet Terror, the one element I do like, is the relationship between Jeff Fahey and Michael Biehn. And Michael Biehn is the sheriff, meaning he is one of the badasses in this movie. The shit about the barbecue sauce is so silly, you almost kind of have to love it because it's so dumb. The secret of the barbecue sauce. But the reason why I felt like it needed to be mentioned is because Michael Biehn makes his entrance by walking into the hospital where a zombie infestation is basically taking place, or a virus. And he storms in and throws these swinging doors wide open and has his gun out and is talking fast to the people behind him. And he's the one in charge and he's a man of action. And Michael Biehn went to Rodriguez and was like, are you sure you want to shoot it this way? It's kind of weird. Why in this situation, why would I have my gun out? Why would I be talking loud when other people in a hospital can hear me? And he's like, trust me, you want to make the entrance this way. And then when Biehn saw the movie in the theater and saw heard the audience go nuts when he's introduced into the movie by just coming forcefully through that door, he's like, oh, I get it now. And since then, Biehn has gone on to become a writer-director himself. And he directs movies and acts in a lot of movies with his current wife, Jennifer Blank Biehn, who I've heard is a nice person. She's a kind of a scream queen of the Daniel Harris variety. None of his movies seem to be particularly great at this point, but I don't think that's the point. No. And I did watch one of them for this, which is The Victim in 2011. And I think it's even dedicated to Robert Rodriguez. He took the Grindhouse thing and ran with it. And Michael Biehn made the movie that probably should have been in Grindhouse with Death Proof instead of Planet Terror. And that was The Victim, which is not a great movie.
No, I actually rented it and I think I fell asleep 20 minutes into it.
The last 30 seconds of it is hysterical. It's got a twist ending. You see the twist coming from a mile away. So I'm not going to give him enormous credit for putting one over on us, but the way he presents it, and I'm not going to say how he presents it, but it's so quick and so just funny. And it made me realize, oh, he's in on this the whole way through. He knows what he's doing. He's making a dumb movie. I'm not a huge fan of the other actors in it. Well, I like Danielle Harris fine, but she's kind of just wasted as the girl. for parts of it. But I think there were enough little twists and turns. It doesn't really keep you guessing, but it keeps you entertained. Yeah, I wouldn't watch it at 3 a.m. because you'll fall asleep.
Yeah.
but as far as writing and directing jobs, and he's even said that I think he had 6 weeks to get it ready for production, starting with page 1 of the script. So it was quickly written. It seemed more like an exercise for him, and I think it was a fun exercise, and I like it. I would recommend The Victim if you like low budget horror.
Yeah.
It's not going to blow your mind. You're going to see the twist coming. It's not as crazy as Deadfall by any shot, but there's little moments where you can just see Michael Biehn having fun, and that's what's worth it. Writing and directing this and directing his girlfriend at the time, now wife, you can tell he's just having a good time. And I want to see Michael Biehn having a good time because I know he's struggled for a long time with his addictions and things. And we got to get him on the show or something. I would love to talk to Michael Biehn.
Same, yeah, no, for real.
I want to know
one
more
of those
about
guys
his
that does a lot of the
personality.
conventions that I still have yet to meet. He's one of those guys I'd love to get a photo with, or even just shake his hand and thank him for what he's done. So
yeah, I agree. So let's put a cap on this, I suppose. He does have more movies coming. He's still a working actor. Like I said, he has about 110 IMDb credits on acting alone. I think he's directed 3 or 4 movies now, at least 3. So he's done a really good job of being a working actor. You know, much like Bruce Campbell has done a great job of being a working actor. He's a movie star in his own right. He's just a different kind of movie star.
yeah, absolutely.
And he's got the talent, and he seems like a cool enough guy in real life. He's just a great character actor, interesting dude.
Been in some phenomenal movies and given us some, very memorable roles. So I think he's just one of those guys that either you really get, like, if you know him, you're going to appreciate his work.
Exactly. And as far as my recommendations go, I think most of us have seen his biggies. So please do seek out The Fan and Deadfall and Rampage. They are out there. They are available.
Yep.
But yeah, see another side of Biehn. It's not another side that doesn't fit with the side that you've seen. It's just a fascinating other side.
Yep. Well said.
So anything else you'd like to add, James?
No, just once again, I've learned so much in this episode, not just about film history, but about, world history, about American history, about the Old West.
About hook hands.
I now have to see the movie Deadfall before I go to sleep tonight, because otherwise I'll have dreams about it.
Well, make sure you rent it off of there's a free YouTube version of it, but it's pan and scan. And I'm pretty sure the pan and scan does not reflect the glory of the hook hand or of the prosthetic nose on Nick Cage. So if you can, get a hold of the nice cleaned up copy that Lionsgate put out. But you won't regret it. The actors, you'll understand why they might regret it.
Exactly.
But you will not regret seeing Deadfall. So
fantastic. Well, Devin, as always, it's always a pleasure. Now that you have a work schedule, I know we've said this in the last 2 podcasts, maybe even 3 episodes, about making sure that we release these more often. It is what it is. This podcast is free. You're not paying for it. So hopefully that can get us off the hook a little bit for, not being as consistent. But
yeah, we've been talking about a Patreon forever, and it just came down to not until we become consistent.
Yeah, exactly. We will not make anybody forced to, we need to prove ourselves worthy of a Patreon.
But I will point out, if we had Patreon money, I would have been able to rent Rampage. So
see,
there you go. There's
catch-22.
Give and take. But anyways, the next episode that we want to do, I'm not going to reveal what it is yet, but it is a little bit more timely than our other topics. So I think we will have that coming up in the next couple of weeks. And there's fewer films that we are going to, and there's no way that either one of us have not seen all of these films before. So yeah.
And then I think by the next episode, I'll have a little breakdown of my Texas Frightmare experience too.
Yes, I want to know.
Yeah.
So, all right,
cool. Report back.
Well, I can't wait to hear back from that, and I can't wait to get back into the den with you, man. I think the next one's going to be fun. This one was a lot of fun.
This one was super fun. I feel like we could have said way more, but he's been weirdly prolific, especially in the last decade, putting out a lot of stuff. So, but Yes, Devin, as always, I really enjoyed it. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it as much as I felt the joy making it. I will let you finish it off, though.
All right, folks. Well, keep checking here. We are going to have something very soon within the next 2 weeks, I would say. So keep checking on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere you find podcasts. You can find us on YouTube now, where I also will create playlists for each episode where you can go and check out interviews with the actors or trailers for the movies or Siskel and Ebert reviews, and sometimes the full movie when you get a chance to on YouTube. I try not to do the ones that are outwardly pirated, but because those will tend to disappear first anyways.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff that we've been able to put up there, and like us on the social medias, and we will get back to you as soon as I can. Take care, James.
You too, Devin.
Bye.
Until next time. Bye.